Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76: The Attention of the Sky Eye Society. After combining her own analysis with her own judgment, Lyra finally made up her mind. She pulled out a document and added Thea Quinn after Bruce Wayne's name at the beginning. The AOM, whose mission is to safeguard humanity, was originally founded by Air Force Colonel Steve Trevor. Over time, and with Steve's relationship with Wonder Woman, the organization grew in size and attracted hostility from both the government and the corporate world. It was then that Amanda, a shrewd and ruthless woman, came into the notice of the higher-ups. Using various pretexts for greater good, she diverted significant resources from Steve. While Steve remained the organization's leader, her growing supporters made her a prominent figure within the AOM. As a newcomer with no background or experience, Amanda constantly strengthened her authority to secure more resources. She desperately needed more credit to reach the top of the AOM. She wanted to recruit the supercriminals held by the organization for her own use. After all, many missions were dangerous and cold-blooded, making them difficult for ordinary soldiers or agents to accomplish. These villains were needed to do the dirty work, but they wouldn't give in easily. She desperately needed a superhero she could influence to act as a deterrent. Batman had been a good choice, but now Thea seemed like a good fit. Batman was more mature, but mentally unstable and had a negative attitude towards those in power. Thea was young and inexperienced, but with her mother about to reach a higher level, the chances of her betrayal were slim. Should she choose someone with experience or someone she could trust? The choice between the two was a bit fraught, but with plenty of time, she could only put the issue aside. Leela left her room and breathed a sigh of relief as she faced the dark night. She had a vague idea of Amanda's plan, but she didn't know how her report would affect Thea, a woman she was relatively approachable. Whether it would be good or bad, only time would tell. She was simply reporting what she had observed. "Sir, the other two have awakened." An agent waited outside for a moment. Upon seeing her emerge, he immediately stepped forward to report. "Got it," Lyra nodded. Since they were awake, she might as well go check on them. As she reached the door and was about to push it open, she overheard the father-daughter conversation. "Dad, Robin's in danger, you know. That guy from Star City should have rescued Robin instead of this unknown woman. If Robin were here, we could go back and rescue everyone now." Barbara was complaining to Commissioner Gordon in the room. The guy from Star City she was referring to was, unsurprisingly, Miss Thea. After all, she was her lifesaver, so referring to her as she wasn't polite, and she didn't want to use an honorific. She finally settled on the vague guy from Star City. Commissioner Gordon didn't see any problem with the rescue. He knew Lyra's identity, and having saved everyone who needed to be saved was a good thing. As for Robin, he didn't see much use for her. He could fight, sure, but how many? 5 or 10? It's practically pointless in this situation. He'd just treated his daughter like a treasure. If he'd saved Robin, who knows where they'd be hiding right now? How could they possibly have such a spacious villa for you to rest in, with 6 or 7 medical staff busy caring for you? But for his daughter's sake, he said nothing. Just because he didn't say anything didn't mean Lyra wouldn't say anything. Lyra didn't understand at first, but then she heard the unknown woman and thought about it over and over again, realizing it was referring to her. What's the point? Shouldn't I be saved? Shouldn't I be left in the hands of the criminals? Your boyfriend deserved to be saved, so I should die, right? Don't let me get you, bitch. Or you'll regret ever giving birth to me. Lyra had risen to such a high position in a medley of crooked people like the Sky Eye Society. She wasn't a good-tempered person, and she had plenty of ulterior motives. Women are known for their acting prowess. She played it safe, knocked on the door, offered her condolences to Gordon and his daughter, and then left. Returning to her room, she pulled out a report and began writing. This document was her original purpose, a written assessment of the abilities, personalities, and preferences of the members of Batman's team. When she got Barbara's paper, Lyra snorted coldly and began writing without a second thought. Of course, she wouldn't paint Barbara in a particularly negative light. That would be immediately obvious to anyone with ulterior motives, making her appear vindictive and potentially damaging her career. She used only positive adjectives: helpful, selfless, and righteous, filling a long, drawn-out page with all sorts of jargon. These words might sound good for publicity, but in the eyes of the Special Front, especially a dark-hearted woman like Amanda, they signify idiocy, and especially idiocy. If it were Batman or Thea's report, she might verify it, but for a second or third-tier hero like Barbara, she'd simply glance over it, sign it, and file it away. She didn't have the energy to verify anything, she simply accepted whatever her subordinates said. And with someone of Lyra's rank, even if she found a mistake, she wouldn't take it seriously. There wasn't a problem right now, but when something tougher comes up and a passionate hero needs to take the lead, this file will be a huge help. As Leela held the end of her pen, pondering how to write a 500-word review, a subordinate knocked on the door. "Sir, Miss Thea's back." "Back? When did she leave? What had she been doing?" That was the problem with these heroes, they were too independent. It had only been a short while, and she'd already gone off. "Where is she?" Leela's head was filled with questions, and she decided she had to have a serious talk with her about discipline. In the interrogation room, Miss Thea brought back a live person, the subordinate's face brimmed with excitement. "Oh, amazing." That was all Leela could say about her feelings. It hadn't even been 20 minutes, and she'd already been on the run again? What a tough girl. What kind of grudge do you have against these gangsters? You've already killed 3 rounds in one night. Actually, Thea wasn't as tough as she'd imagined. She just thought she was practically invincible at high altitude, which was why she flew over so confidently. Before leaving, she even went to get a gas mask, supposedly the Sky-Eye's most effective, which wasn't targeted, but it was comprehensive, so it was likely effective. But this time, unlike before, the process was anything but smooth. The campers weren't fools. 4 or 5 searchlights illuminated the entire camp like daylight. The patrolling bandits, like they had neck problems, craned their necks to look up at the sky instead of the ground. Xiao was still several hundred meters from the camp when she was spotted. Chapter 77 Veritaserum. "Well, we ignored you the first time you came, and magnanimously let you go the second time, and now you're back again? It's true that uncles can tolerate it, but aunts can't. The gang at the camp isn't all illiterate, there are still a few self-proclaimed criminals with high IQs. They gathered the hostages, strengthened the security, activated the searchlights, and even set up a small radar. So, Thea was spotted before she even reached the camp. Despite being spotted, Thea wasn't worried. From over 200 meters above ground, the men below looked like ants. Bows and arrows were useless. Even if she had a bomb, she wouldn't dare throw it. If it killed hundreds of civilians, she'd be completely infamous. They couldn't do anything about her. Gotham didn't have many high-tech weapons. Everyone was focused on curing mental illness, what's commonly known as spiritual civilization. There was little focus on developing firearms. Having a bazooka was considered a formidable weapon. As for the heat-seeking missiles that could threaten Thea, these guys didn't have any. The hot-tempered ones raised their AKs and fired a few rounds into the sky, not caring whether they hit or not. The ones with a little bit of sense put guns to the hostages' heads and shouted at the sky with loudspeakers, meaning that if you don't come down, we will shoot. Thea didn't take it seriously at all. You guys have seen too many movies. I'm not on the justice side at all. Kill them if you want. I don't even know these people. Even if you kill Robin, it has nothing to do with me. I'll just observe a half-minute silence at most. You want me to go down and die? Are you kidding me? She walked around the camp twice as if nothing had happened. She could see that these people were just a mob. There was no organization or discipline. Some had tattoos, facial tattoos, and piercings. Few were dressed normally. However, these people were well equipped, all wearing American military uniforms. Did they rob a military base in Gotham? But Thea looked carefully twice and saw only minor figures, none of whom lasted more than 3 minutes. There weren't any prominent figures, at least not that she saw. The spot where Robin had fainted earlier was deserted. A few bandits could be seen gathering hostages. She could only apologize to Robin. We tried our best, and God bless you later. Just as she was about to head home, she saw a bandit wandering alone off to the side, seemingly urinating. Thea watched him saunter unceremoniously, wondering if he was suffering from kidney failure or something else, but he stood there for a full 3 minutes. Are they trying to lure me down? These people in this camp have some brains. A quick scan with infrared goggles revealed at least 10 people hiding nearby. She had been planning to just leave, but since you've sent me a live person, it's best not to appear as though the people of Star City are ignorant of etiquette. She had no choice but to decline. Sia hadn't been going at top speed, and the gang had no idea how fast her floating object was. They simply assumed it was about the same speed as a car, so the ambush they'd set up was neither too large nor too small. Sia reached the edge of the decoy at just under 150 kilometers per hour. It was a forested area where 8 criminals were hiding. Infrared sensors showed them crouching motionless, waiting for Sia to take the bait. Just as the gang expected the enemy to fly overhead and then perform a show of making dumplings, Sia suddenly accelerated, spun in a wide circle, and sprinted down the other side towards the decoy. Unprepared for this unexpected turn of events, their lack of formal training was clearly exposed. 2 of the criminals instinctively rushed out, rifles in hand. They were stunned. "I'm out now? What's next?" As they froze, the others behind them shouted, "Come back, come back." The 2 foolish men turned back into the woods. But by then, Thea had already completed her mission. Her skateboard, a modified piece of emergency equipment, had a chain on each of its V-shaped wings. Having used up one chain while pulling Gordon and his daughter on the ticket, the remaining chain was perfectly suited for the man holding up his pants. She instantly accelerated to 300 kilometers per hour and, before the others could react, rushed about 100 meters in front of the decoy. It was unclear what instructions the gang had given her, or if they were simply trying to be authentic. Anyway, Thea saw him, as he was unbuckling his belt. Thea's sudden appearance startled the enemy, who couldn't react. Should he pull up his pants first or reach for his weapon? In the dead of night, in total darkness, Thea's speed was so fast that she could only make out a blurry figure. She pressed the trigger with her left foot, and a chain with a sharp arrowhead pierced the decoy's shoulder. This arrowhead wasn't designed by Thea. It was built into the equipment itself, designed to grip onto solid objects like rock walls and tree trunks, creating a man-made tunnel through the air. The arrowhead was forged from special steel. Once it locked onto its target, 3 small claws automatically popped out from within, ensuring it wouldn't fall out. If it could penetrate a stone, let alone a living being, this decoy, unaware that his treatment had been elevated to the same level as the large stones of a bridge pier, was instantly stunned by the arrow, as thick as his arm. Thea felt his flesh and blood wouldn't be as strong as stone. She circled around him once more before he collapsed unconscious. Then, to the astonishment of the others, she proudly pulled the captive aloft and departed. Cautiously, fearing she would expose Leela's base, she relied on her speed to fly another half-circle around Gotham before returning to the base with a captive dangling from her. Back at the base, she removed her gas mask. It was surprisingly powerful. It had fought its way in and out without a single iota of damage. Unfortunately, the cost was said to be prohibitive. Even with the wealth of the Sky Eye Society, they couldn't make many, and even fewer were allocated to the base. He got off the skateboard and tossed the prisoner to the agents, who stared at him with strange eyes. "Here's a live captive. See if you can get anything out of him." The agents were horrified at the sight of him. Half his body was stained red. Fortunately, it was night, high above the ground, and the icy air had frozen most of his wounds, allowing him to be pulled alive. Furthermore, when unconscious, the body automatically enters a protective mechanism, with all functions at extremely low levels, preventing him from dying from the pressure of 300 kilometers per hour. This was the scene Leela had witnessed when she entered. She had seen far worse in her years in the military, but she didn't take it seriously. She immediately ordered a cardiac stimulant and adrenaline injection, the maximum dose, and demanded a confession. Whether he lived or died was of no concern to her. Even Thea felt uncomfortable about being framed, so she had to add a more serious explanation. After all, Thea lived on campus, so she wasn't innocent. She was simply an unwitting victim, caught on the crossfire for no apparent reason. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't angry. Judging from his appearance, this guy probably doesn't have a strong will. It's not impossible to get something out of him using whips and pliers, but considering that time is tight and there's no time to waste, he ordered his men to prepare 2 kilograms of sodium thiopental, commonly known as truth serum, because he didn't trust him not to talk. Chapter 78 The Scarecrow Must Die. While the captive was still unconscious, Gordon, his daughter, and Felicity slowly approached. It wasn't that they didn't want to hurry, but they simply didn't have the energy. "Hey, are you okay?" Thea patted Felicity's cheek. "It's okay, just a little swollen." "Do you know why the gangster hit me in the face?" Felicity's eyes were filled with confusion. Thea glanced at her sideways. thinking it might be a little red and swollen. Honestly, she had been so kind, but saving her had rubbed her face so swollen. She couldn't tell the truth and could only blame the gangsters. She shook her head quickly. I don't know. It was like this when I rescued you. Apply this to you. It's working well. She then pulled out a bottle of ointment that Ms. Shiva had given her from her backpack and tossed it over. Turning her head, she caught a glimpse of Barbara's profile. The large swelling on her forehead looked like the Golden Horn King from a distance. Did she do this herself? Feeling a little guilty, she tossed another bottle over. Here, apply it and the swelling will go down quickly. Barbara had actually been listening to her, and when she tossed the bottle, she took it. It was fine to say something behind her back without anyone noticing, but in person, she had to be polite and considerate. After all, she was the one who saved her and her daughter. Thank you for saving us, Barbara said politely. You're back on campus again? Did you see Robin? Thea sighed. No, the security there was too tight. I couldn't get in alone. I'm so sorry. Her apology wasn't entirely sincere, it was just a habitual politeness. No one would blame her. Even Barbara, who had rushed 3 times that night without backup or protective gear, couldn't say anything. She'd been lying there all night, the difference being that she was a captive and now a free man, but she hadn't done anything. Seeing she didn't say anything, Thea ignored her and turned to Felicity, saying, Is the drone still working? I haven't seen Catwoman. Go look for her. Catwoman, she shouldn't be back on campus. She's been out the whole time. I'll contact her right away. Felicity was still a little dizzy. After a long thought, she couldn't come up with a lie. She just took out her phone and dialed. When did you two become so close? Thea found it strange. Their personalities had almost nothing in common. One couldn't stay home, while the other was a homebody. The fact that they could still talk despite such different lifestyles only showed that their natures were similar. Call her back quickly. Thea didn't bother with trivial matters. The priority now was to gather all the troops immediately and then, in one fell swoop, wipe out the pests that were ruining her plan for a safe and united Gotham. At this point, she didn't care whether she had command authority or not. She had been to the scene 3 times already, and she knew the situation best, so she didn't consult anyone else. Commissioner Gordon, how many officers can you muster right now? I need them on scene in half an hour, Thea said gravely, looking at the old commissioner. You still want to go? Commissioner Gordon was startled by her sheer determination. How many times had this happened tonight? But thinking of this outsider, a young woman, so eager to charge forward, he, as a Gothamite, couldn't afford to fall behind. He mentally calculated, about 20, that's enough. Help Felicity direct them directly to the campus. The old commissioner's fighting ability might have been decent in his youth, but now he's no better than an average person. Support from the rear is best. Barbara, give yourself 20 minutes to recover, then change into your combat uniforms. Let's go rescue them. Has Felicity contacted Catwoman? Tell her to return quickly, Agent Lila. Thea was happily giving orders when she realized the agent couldn't lead them herself, and paused mid-sentence. I'll go with you. With 5 agents under my belt, I can also urgently dispatch attack helicopters. However, there are too many civilians there, so they'll only serve as a deterrent. Leela quickly took over, expressing her full support for Thea's plan. No one objected. The old director and his men were used to following Batman's orders, a habit they wouldn't change overnight. Now it was just a new person, and since Thea had saved his life, he didn't see anything wrong with letting her take charge. Barbara simply wanted to rescue her boyfriend, so she had no objection to anyone taking charge. Although she still stumbled a little, she followed the instructions and changed into her combat uniform. She had actually left her clothes on campus, so she could only find a whip and a mask. Thea began to discuss the distribution of firepower with the director, and Leela joined in. Due to the limited supply of gas masks, only 5 could provide full protection. The rest were standard versions. Several technicians said they had too little data to determine if they were effective. For now, the only solution was to have officers wearing ordinary masks provide cover on the perimeter, while a few heroes would have to do the real work. Perhaps this was the theme of this world. Thea couldn't understand why they'd reverted to the old path of individual heroism, but it was the only way to go. And looking at the misfits around her, it seemed like she'd have to be the main force. The helpers were becoming the backbone. It was like Brock's helping to kill the minions, only to get so carried away that he attacked Sargeras with his axe. "Sir, we've found out." Scarecrow spread the fear gas that attacked the camp this time. A familiar-looking agent hurried over to report. "Damn, Scarecrow. How could it be this guy? A whole group of us got wiped out in a snap by a second-rate wretch like that." Thea couldn't contain her fury any longer. She felt like she'd gone into the mountains fully equipped to fight a tiger, only to be bitten by a wild dog without the tiger noticing. She couldn't stand it. Perhaps her eyes were a little intimidating, and the agent who had brought the news took a step back, but he still whispered, "They plan to transport everyone after daybreak, but he doesn't know where to go." They couldn't wait any longer. They had to act immediately. No one knew if they would transport the hostages beforehand. After all, they had already alerted the enemy 3 times, so they probably wouldn't be so reckless as to wait until daybreak. "Barbara, we have to leave early. How much strength have you recovered?" Thea was truly helpless. Besides herself, she seemed to be the only one who could fight the most. Although she had her doubts about her abilities, she really had no one else to turn to. Chapter 79, Pursuit. Seeing her unwavering expression, Barbara couldn't say anything. Whether it was for her sense of justice or to save her boyfriend, she had to bite the bullet and press on. She stamped her feet, feeling a bit better than before, when she'd been as limp as noodles. She wondered if she could make it out alive in her current state, and she debated whether to say goodbye to her father and share a few final words. "What happened? Call me back so quickly." Catwoman's timely return gave her a boost of confidence in the operation, and she silently prayed to God to protect her. Her excitement softened even her previous dislike for Catwoman. Thea didn't have time to explain. She was busy discussing the allocation of police support with Gordon and motioned for Barbara to explain. Barbara could only grudgingly recount Catwoman's story. She didn't know much about the situation, having been in bed all night, relying on her own deductions and guesswork to reconstruct the events. As for how accurate the story was, no one cared. Scarecrow, the name was familiar to Catwoman. This was truly an old rival. Upon hearing that even Robin had fallen, Catwoman simply thought, "It's not that I don't understand, but that the world is changing so quickly." Hopefully, Robin's true identity won't be revealed. He's not Batman, and he won't enjoy Brock-a-back treatment. If discovered, he'll be shot without a second thought. After a moment's hesitation, Catwoman handed her whip to Barbara. She couldn't use a dagger or a baton, but she couldn't. Without it, her combat effectiveness would be reduced by 30%. Barbara took it and wielded it a few times, finding it quite comfortable. After all, they were all bruises, and this gave her a bit more confidence than charging in with a pistol. Thea approached and handed each of them a gas mask. "Put them on when you get to the camp. The 3 of us will focus on eliminating any remaining resistance. The Eye of the Sky will be responsible for clearing out the remaining forces, and the remaining police will focus on hostage rescue." "Is that all a problem?" Thea glanced around, seeing that everyone agreed with this arrangement. With a wave of her hand, she set off. Thea found a car driven by an agent and climbed in. This time, she didn't fly on her skateboard, but instead used her mind to control it and follow the group. She feared a complete disaster if she rushed in with the 2 remaining female members of the Bat team and discovered that reinforcements were still on the way. She also needed to recover some strength. Although she tended to be more alert at night and sleepy during the day, the night had been quite exhausting. In another car, Barbara and Catwoman were also working hard to recover. Seeing Thea so enthusiastic about abandon suppression, they had no choice but to seize every moment to prepare themselves for the battle. "Stop. Felicity, bring up the drone footage." When they were about a mile from the camp, Thea saw the distant light as bright as day and hurriedly ordered the convoy to halt. Arriving at Lyra's command vehicle, a live feed was transmitted. "They've already started evacuating. We can't wait any longer," Catwoman said with a quick glance, her expression anxious. Yes, thanks to Thea's constant harassment throughout the night, the gang had finally begun to evacuate. The footage showed about 40 or 50 black hooded soldiers, occasionally dotted with a few in American military uniforms. They were working in pairs, carrying unconscious civilians to the rear. However, their targets weren't random, they were only targeting strong men and young women. "Where's Robin? Is he in danger?" Barbara, lacking strength, was a step behind Catwoman. Only after she got aboard the command vehicle did she see the gangs transporting people. Her heart leaped to her throat, and she asked in panic. Thea wanted to say it was just a transport, not a firing squad, and that they were only selecting strong and capable men. How could Robin, who had been squeezed so thin by you, be in danger? But considering Barbara had now become a powerful force, she could only suppress her urge to complain. Putting aside her frivolous thoughts, she said seriously, "Don't worry. Felicity's looking for their transport vehicles. I'll intercept them later, as long as they weren't firing recklessly." Thea wasn't afraid. These guys couldn't open portals, so escaping wouldn't be easy. "Thea, I found them. A couple of trucks, each loaded with unconscious civilians, have already left the camp. There are so many people, I can't even tell if Robin is here." Felicity wasn't as physically strong as the others, but despite feeling a bit dizzy, she followed them into the command vehicle. She had already pulled up footage from several vehicles on the drone. To get a clearer view, she ignored the crowd watching and quickly blacked out satellites from who knows what country or company. Leela pretended not to notice. The remaining agents exchanged glances, wondering if they should arrest this guy after this was over. How brazen. Doing this right in front of us? We're on the government payroll. I'll intercept. Everyone else, follow a pre-planned move. Agent Leela, have your attack helicopters help me draw attention from the front, Thea said, and began to organize her equipment. Fearing she was running low on arrows, she even took a submachine gun from a familiar-looking agent. Catwoman and Barbara normally didn't use guns, and Batman kept a close eye on them. But now, with the Emperor far away, they couldn't care less. They all disembarked from the command vehicle, their weapons laden. With a rumble, a massive attack helicopter appeared within sight and sped towards the camp as they watched. "I'm getting on too. Be careful," Thea instructed the other women, turning around. "You too." Barbara, who always had a bad relationship with her, offered a rare response. She smiled and nodded, then jumped onto her skateboard and, following Felicity's instructions, flew towards the other side of the road. By then, the sky was gradually brightening. After a night of tossing and turning, Thea truly realized that life in Gotham required a strong will. She was completely exhausted. It was truly remarkable that Batman hadn't gone mad after all these years of silent protection. The light was growing, and visibility was improving. This was a boon for Thea searching for targets on the ground, but it was also a boon for the criminals on the ground. Although she couldn't hear what the people below were saying from high above, she saw 3 large trucks crisscrossing the highway, many of them pointing and talking at her. She knew they were all talking nonsense. She was exhausted from a night of no rest, and their constant staring at the sky only made it more tiring. Several people below rubbed their eyes, confirming it wasn't their own dazzle, but rather that the flying creature had caught up again. A few, exhausted, pulled out their pistols and rifles, firing into the air regardless of range. Chapter 80 Enthusiastic Citizens. Shia ignored the men's provocations, picking up speed, overtaking several trucks and disappearing from view. She gave up? Of course not. This place was near the university, so traffic was plentiful. Shia planned to follow their path and find a narrow stretch of road to intercept all the vehicles. A gas station? No, that was too dangerous. If I didn't kill many enemies, someone with poor eyesight would explode the tanks, leaving me covered in blood from the wide area AoE. She gave up. An intersection? Even worse. What if I stopped one car and the remaining 2 split up? I couldn't use the shadow clone technique, so she gave up again. She searched and searched until she came upon a section of road. A 4-lane road had been inexplicably blocked for most of the way. It was undoubtedly the work of the city's thugs. Were they setting up a toll checkpoint? Was this the road I was driving on? It was heaven's will. This would save her so much trouble. This was it. Thea climbed higher, watching a few trucks slowly approach from the end of the road in the distance. She thought with disdain, these idiots, thinking they'd take this route, didn't even bother sending someone to test the waters? They just rushed out like that. Hollowbrow. They don't even know how to spell death. She'd wronged him. No one was stupid. Scarecrow was a university professor, thriving under Batman's shadow. His intelligence was still up to par. He'd been ordered to check the road conditions, but after being tormented by Thea all night, they'd completely forgotten about it. The driver was trembling with nervousness, convinced he was the enemy's primary target. He frantically slammed the accelerator and brakes, the car's speed fluctuating. There was nothing he could do. Under these conditions, the driver's mortality rate was as high as 90%. At least in movies, the enemy always targeted the driver of the lead vehicle. The remaining men, feeling less stressed, held their rifles, ready to engage any enemy who might come their way. Just as the driver of the lead car was wondering if it was an arrow piercing his eye or a rocket blast that would blow him skyward, he saw a checkpoint on the road ahead. A bearded man menacingly waved at him to stop. Who is this? As a small-time leader of the Scarecrow team, he was quite capable, but the sudden appearance of the beard bewildered him. Although the enemy in the sky before couldn't be identified as male or female, judging by his size, it couldn't be this person. Moreover, judging by his attire, disheveled hair and face, his skin so black it was impossible to tell, his mouth wide open, and a mouthful of yellow teeth. This was the look of a Gotham homeless man. Why did the flying enemy send this guy? Puzzled, but whether to gauge the enemy's situation or to relieve his own stress, he slowly stopped the car and leaned over. What's up? The homeless man curled his lips, but didn't answer. He put his left hand to his mouth and blew forcefully. Woo! As the whistle blared, a variety of strangely dressed individuals began to emerge from all directions. They were dressed in all sorts of clothing, men and women, young and old. Over 20 of them suddenly emerged, the best armed with pistols, the lesser ones clutching iron bars. Give us half of what's in your car. The bearded homeless man in the lead, a shotgun in hand, fired a shot into the air to prove he had ammunition, gazing at the gang in the car with amusement. Hiding in a distant tree, Thea was delighted to see the scene unfold. Who said Gotham was full of unruly people? That was a lie. These guys were quite sweet. They feared the difficulty of completing this mission alone, so they offered their own food and rations to help him without asking for anything in return. What kind people are they? Where some are happy, others are sad. The driver of the lead car was in agony. As a local, he already knew the group below had nothing to do with the previous flying enemy. This was a typical Gotham highway robbery ring. This gang had a wide variety of weapons and no apparent organization. They weren't even a small gang, just a bunch of low-level gangsters. Compared to the American-style equipment and elite training they wore, they looked like infants. A sense of superiority washed over him, and a hint of derision slipped through his face. As the poster boy for roadblocks, the bearded homeless man relied on his excellent eyesight. The driver's disdain caught his eye, and feeling his dignity challenged, he grabbed his shotgun and fired into the driver's rearview mirror without a second thought. Bang! You hear me? Get down, the bearded man shouted fiercely. If he hadn't fired, the Scarecrow gang would have been ready to charge. He and his men had a mission to accomplish and didn't have the time to waste with these scumbags. But his shot unleashed a fury on them. They'd already been up all night, tormented by the enemy, and now they were on the move before dawn. To say they weren't upset would be a lie, they were just forcing themselves to suppress their temper. Seeing these small fry provoking him, he couldn't stand it. The driver picked up his walkie-talkie and shouted, "Get out. Teach these bastards a lesson." Scarecrow had truly put a lot of effort into his gang. After the Gotham chaos, he'd successfully robbed a U.S. military arsenal, arming his men to the level of a regular army. While Gotham wouldn't be invincible at that level, it was still quite strong among the major powers. 3 vehicles, each with a driver and 3 gunmen, 12 men, all wearing body armor and helmets, disembarked from the trucks, rifles drawn. Without needing any direction, they took cover and sought blind spots, demonstrating their impressive military prowess. The bearded robber was stunned by their professionalism, wondering if they were U.S. troops. Had he hit a wall? He was just trying to get rid of his pocket money, not to engage in a fight with the army. Unaware of his inner thoughts, the heavily armed Scarecrow bandit didn't bother to engage in a conversation. A high-pitched voice echoed, "Ready, fire." Hiding in the distance, Thea was initially startled by the gang's sophisticated equipment. Seeing them about to fire, she naturally wanted to prevent the Gothamites, who had brought their own rations to help, from getting hurt. While outnumbered 12 to 20, the crowd had a certain advantage. The disparity in equipment was too great. A real fight would be a crushing victory. She had already drawn a magnetic arrow and knocked it onto her bow. Hearing the firing begin, she didn't hesitate, firing it towards the center of the battlefield. A low buzzing sound echoed, and then, with a continuous pop, crack sound, guns were continuously attracted to the arrows by the immense magnetic force. Thea was magnanimous, encompassing both sides within the range of the arrow. Within 10 seconds, the low rumble died down. And everyone on both sides was surprised to find their guns missing. Chapter 81 Smoke Arrow. Shia observed from a distance and nodded. The effect was good. She had forcibly evened the balance of power between the two sides. This time, these kind-hearted citizens who had brought their own rations to help should be able to leverage their numbers, right? The two groups were unaware of her covert manipulation. The movement was so rapid that they couldn't see the arrows clearly. They only saw the numerous guns being gathered together by an unknown object, eventually forming an irregular cylinder that stood in the center of the field. What was this? This question crossed many people's minds. Some with better eyesight noticed, why did my gun go up there? Realizing their weapon advantage was gone, the Scarecrow team reacted quickly. Two of them leaped onto the car. While it wasn't impossible to fight unarmed, it was inevitable to suffer some injuries, like losing a few teeth or breaking a few fingers. Previously, they had used weapons with a purely competitive mindset, but now that injuries were a concern, several of them immediately retreated. Seeing that everyone was retreating, the leader decided to retreat. They tried to escape, but Thea wouldn't let them. Hiding in the woods behind the homeless, she activated her voice changer and shouted hoarsely, "They're trying to run. Charge!" Then she drew another ordinary arrow, aimed at the fastest runner, and hurled it from a distance. The distance was quite far, at least 200 meters, so Thea wasn't entirely sure. She aimed for the man's torso. She couldn't see where the arrow struck him, but he let out a sharp "ah," and, as he was about to step toward the truck, the sudden arrow pierced his unarmored leg. The intense pain prevented him from taking the next step and he fell off the truck. A few of the Scarecrow team members were more understanding and realized something was amiss. They urged them to get into the truck quickly. But they forgot the nature of Gotham's citizens: madness, the sight of blood, a natural tendency to violence, a touch of the Orcish air. The enthusiastic citizens were already trembling with fear, ready to flee, when Thea's unexpected intervention rekindled their spirits. Seeing one of the unfortunate individuals fall, and the remaining few turn and run instead of seeking revenge, the enthusiastic citizens simply thought the enemy was nothing special. Why would they run? They were clearly afraid of them. Needless to say, they just hit the enemy when it was down. They'd mostly been armed with cold weapons like pipes and baseball bats, with few firearms, so Thea's magnetic arrows had little effect on them. Seeing the enemy unarmed and ready to flee, a few rough-hewn men, like those seeking death, charged forward with foul language. The Scarecrows, intent on retreating, couldn't stand the fists and clubs that were coming their way. They weren't defeated. Since they were so determined to die, they'd grant their wish. Many drew their daggers and short knives and stabbed the enthusiastic citizens. As the cries of "ah" and "ah" continued, Thea realized the impressive fighting power of this group. Even if she had gone in unarmed, she might not have been able to defeat these 11 men. Yes, there were only 11 left. The guy she had shot an arrow at earlier lay gasping for air on the ground, perhaps suffering secondary damage from the fall. This was not going to work. The 11, with their incredible fighting power and tacit coordination, had already taken down the two homeless men who had rushed in front, including the bearded man who had blocked their way. His once decently dressed, menacing face was now stabbed like a bloody gourd, and he lay on the ground, foaming blood from his mouth. No more watching the show, rolling up his sleeves and fighting? That was impossible. Thea always remembered that she was here to help, and that principle could not be lost. To make the fight between the two groups of Gothamites more fair and interesting, she decided to attack the stronger side. She knocked an arrow and began to take aim. Soon, a figure wielding two short knives, swinging them up and down like a windmill, caught her eye. However, the body armor they wore proved cumbersome, forcing them to target unprotected limbs. With a relentless whoosh, Thea shot her arrows, shifting positions. The skateboard's exceptional maneuverability was evident, allowing her to move with the swiftness of the wind, exerting virtually no energy. Although the Scarecrow team had already noticed something was amiss, the robbers were clueless. Seeing the enemy fall, they failed to realize they were being backed up, believing they had been hacked to death. Soon, Thea had shot down 4 of the 11-man team, and the homeless gang had ganged up on one more, bringing the score to 6-18. The sheer number of people rendered the Scarecrow team's elite training and expert coordination useless. If they could fight and retreat, they might have been able to defeat the larger force. But they couldn't run. If the people in the car couldn't get to the Scarecrow, given their understanding of their leader, they would be practically terrified. The 6 could only form pairs, back to back, barely holding off the homeless men, muttering to themselves, "God bless you." Whether God knew about this, Thea didn't know, but she certainly showed her style. She felt a little uneasy looking at the 18 fierce homeless men. With this group charging at her, she was in real trouble. If you don't believe me, just look at how utterly miserable Master Yi was at the shipyard in the third film, besieged by dozens of men. The advantage of numbers is a powerful deterrent when one's own strength hasn't reached a certain level. A few dozen men wouldn't be a problem. Thea wasn't that ferocious. It would be difficult for her to take on this group, but fortunately, she had a ready-made human shield. This time, she put aside her past grudges and decided to help the Scarecrow gang. Her evil arrows turned back to target the kind-hearted Gotham citizens, and the process of dealing with these unarmored men could only be described as effortless and enjoyable. In less than half a minute, she had shot down 8 more homeless men. The situation was once again balanced, 6-10. By this time, even the most clueless of the gang members knew there was an enemy lurking nearby. The arrows gleaming in their companions' bodies couldn't possibly have been self-inflicted. Several burly men, already high on hamburgers and cola, paused their assault on the Scarecrow group, their mouths agape and eyes wide open as they looked around. Thea couldn't let them stop. If the homeless found them and started beating them up, the Scarecrows would have to chase them down in their cars. It was best to take them all down now. She drew an arrow and knocked it onto her bow. It wasn't a specially crafted arrow, but one she'd modified from the smoke bombs provided by the Batman team on campus. She hadn't had a chance to test the specifics, but she was going to use it today to see how it worked. With a whoosh, the arrow struck the ground, a slight vibration triggering a mechanism within it. A puff of white smoke instantly enveloped the area. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 is too brutal. Before Thea could even register a single word after firing her arrow, the crowd within the shroud of smoke had already spontaneously reported the results of the arrow. Batman's smoke bomb, run, Batman's coming. From the smoke rose a clamor of activity, like a market. Thea was speechless. Are you kidding me? Just smelling something frightens you so much? Thea was deeply concerned about Bruce's long-standing bullying of Gotham's citizens. Would scaring them worsen their already uncured illness? Since you've misunderstood, then let it be. Thea wouldn't be so careless as to stand up and introduce herself. Just assume it was Bruce who attacked you. Donning infrared goggles, she aimed at the red shadow in the smoke and fired indiscriminately. Like playing Angry Birds, she kept selecting her target, drawing her bow, and firing, and then continued. Whether her target was killed or not, she didn't care. I've got the situation under control here. How's the situation on campus? And when will my reinforcements arrive? Thea was enjoying this fun game. She made the smoke bomb 3 times thicker and heavier than the original one, so it couldn't be dispersed for a while. She modified the weapon she used to escape into something similar to Zabuza Mamachi's mist-hidden technique. But during the game, she still remembered her mission and asked in the headset, "Where's the police support we were promised?" "We didn't even see a ghost," a busy tone sounded. "Ah, Thea, they're all busy. The enemy is very powerful." Felicity saw that no one was talking, so she had to answer herself. "How many enemies are there?" "The problem with infrared light is that it can only see bioheat energy and can't tell if a person has been hit by an arrow." Thea could only focus on those who were still able to run. 9. Catwoman takes on 4, Barbara handles 3, and Lila and that agent handle 1 each. Oh my god, there are only a few enemies. I thought all the Gotham villains were over there, but it turns out there are only 9 casualties. 12 enemies on my side, plus 20 helpful citizens, haven't said a word. Needless to say, these guys will just rush in with their clubs. Do you have any brains? They're such a savage beast. But saying that would probably dampen their morale. Thea had no more energy left to move around, so fearing she might miss something, she fired another arrow at each target. Quickly, call 3 drivers. I'll go back over there. Thea didn't dare leave immediately. What if she encountered one with exceptional vitality or a heart on the right side, pretending to be dead on the ground, watching her fly away and happily pulling the entire car away? All her efforts would be wasted. You're pretty quick. How are you? We're almost done, Catwoman said breathlessly into the intercom. Since you say so, I won't rush over. Thea was also a little tired. In less than 5 minutes, she had fired 90 arrows. This wasn't like shooting at a target. These guys would dodge and run, and it was impossible to tell who was wearing body armor and who wasn't, so she had to aim for their limbs. The smoke hadn't completely cleared, so it was unclear how effective she was. Thea didn't just rest. She jumped on her skateboard and flew over several cars. Among the crowd, she spotted a thin, dark-haired man. "Hey, guys, I saw Robin. He looks like he's sleeping soundly." "Great, thank you, Thea." Barbara was relieved to hear her boyfriend was okay. Her good mood ignited her potential, and she dispatched her opponent with a few punches and kicks. Just as Thea was debating whether to wake Robin first or tie him to the skateboard and take him away unconscious, the Gotham police arrived. Although she had only called 3, they were still very enthusiastic. Over a dozen people arrived, led by Commissioner Gordon himself. Each one wore GCPD body armor and rushed over with submachine guns in hand. As the smoke gradually cleared, the horrific scene unfolded before everyone's eyes. The once dark black asphalt was now stained red with blood. Over 30 random people lay densely packed along a less than 100-meter stretch of road. Some wore military uniforms, others wore rags, a mix of all kinds. But one thing stood out about them: they were all riddled with arrows, some with 3 or 4, some with 2. The entire area felt less like a modern highway than an ancient battlefield, pelted by a hail of arrows hurled across time by a group of English longbowmen. Many people, stricken by Thea's limb strike tactics, had their hands and feet pinned to the ground. This wouldn't have been a serious problem, a simple bandage would have sufficed, but the chaotic crowd magnified the damage. Many, pinned to the ground by the arrows, were shoved by the crowd, and the metal arrowheads sliced their hands and feet, transforming what were once minor puncture wounds into disabling cuts. Ugh! 2 young officers, dazed by the sight of severed limbs and the thick stench of blood, ran to the side to vomit under the sympathetic gazes of their colleagues. Commissioner Gordon wasn't as clueless as the youngsters. He'd fought in the military in his youth and had seen worse, but in all his years in Gotham, such a large-scale bloodbath was rare, and he felt a little sick to his stomach. Just as he was about to order his men to check for any survivors, he unexpectedly discovered that the injuries to these people were all on their limbs. This made him, who was a saintly person, think that this girl was really a good person. The fight was so brutal, but not a single one of them died. As for the missing limbs, this was a matter for the Disabled Persons Association to consider. He, the police chief, didn't need to worry about it. These people were bad people. Their disabilities would only benefit society. If he really couldn't bear it, he could just organize the police department to donate more money to the Disabled Persons Association at the end of the year. Turn them all away, Commissioner Gordon waved his hand and ordered his men to clean up the mess. "Commissioner, this man has no hands, so we can't torture him." A police officer looked at the disabled person in front of him and realized that he had a problem. This was not taught at all during the police academy training. This prisoner had no hands, so what should he do? He could only ask for help from the old commissioner, known as the Evergreen of Gotham, and waited online anxiously. It's no wonder the old chief is so experienced. Handcuff them together with the other ones who are missing a hand. You can't be without both hands, right? What a good idea. Several police officers who encountered the same problem but didn't dare to say anything admired their companions' courage and handcuffed the disabled people in pairs. "Chief, I'll leave this to you. I'll go over there for support." Thea said hello to Gordon and flew anxiously to the campus. She still wanted to settle the score with Scarecrow. She wouldn't let anyone go, but this guy must be killed. Did she do all this alone? It seems so. She's really vicious. Several police officers didn't know Thea, not to mention she was wearing a mask and a voice changer. Seeing her fly away with murderous intent, several of them turned pale. This scene looked like it was done by 10 people. How could one person do such a lot of damage? How cruel must this person be in normal times? Chapter 83. Is she that strong? Oblivious to her reputation as a brutal figure within the GCPD, Thea flew back to Gotham University like a whirlwind. Entering the campus, Catwoman and the others were right, the battle was over. Due to the overwhelming number of civilians, the Sky Eye's attack helicopters could only act as a deterrent. They wouldn't dare resort to a large-scale firefight against the unconscious civilians scattered across the ground. Consequently, the exchange of fire was relatively small, at least much more harmonious than the bloodbath on Thea's side. Occasionally, several officers could be seen carrying spray cans, spraying the air with aerosols to neutralize the nerve gas released earlier by the Scarecrow. They scurried into the command vehicle. Lila wasn't inside. Catwoman and Barbara sat off to the side, panting, resting. Felicity, reclining on a table, recuperated. She waved languidly, saying nothing when she saw Thea enter. "Have you found the scarecrow?" Thea knew from the looks of the officers that they were likely to have missed the target, but she still asked with lingering hope. "I didn't see him. He probably ran away." Barbara hadn't quite recovered to her peak form. This time, she'd been dragged into this fight by the constraints of various moral and collective ideals. Although she was only facing 3 opponents, she fought with great difficulty. She had a cut on each shoulder and arm. Although bandaged, blood still oozed, demonstrating the depth of the wound. After answering Thea's question, she asked her most pressing question, "Didn't Robin come back with you?" "Don't worry, I came back first. They'll be here soon. Commissioner Gordon is watching." Even if the commissioner wasn't pleased with his son-in-law, he surely wouldn't kill him while he was unconscious. Hearing her boyfriend was beside his father, Barbara felt completely relieved. She nodded in greeting and said nothing more. Thea leaned over to Catwoman and whispered, "Hey, what have you been up to lately?" "The primitive accumulation of capital," Catwoman said elegantly. That was said with such remarkable confidence. It seemed like she wasn't the only one targeting Gotham's wealthy. Just as she was about to discuss which targets would be easier to take down without damaging the heroic faction's reputation, 3 trucks slowly pulled into the campus. It felt a bit inappropriate to discuss this topic now. Thea patted Barbara, who looked dazed beside her. "Robin should be back. Let's go check on him." Barbara wiped her face and instinctively started walking out. Catwoman hurried over to support her, hoping she wouldn't get hurt from a fight. "Let them have a meeting with the command vehicles after they're done," Thea called from a distance. She didn't want to leave. The campus had been sprayed with some new, unidentified aerosol, and the odor, mixed with the already toxic air, was incredibly unpleasant. Catwoman, supporting Barbara, embarked on a 1,000-meter-long search for her husband. Well, it wasn't far. They hadn't gone far when they spotted Robin, barely conscious, sitting on the ground in a daze. The once capable young man now sat there in a daze. His physique was naturally stronger than the other women, and Commissioner Gordon had been the first to administer the antidote. He was arguably the first person to regain consciousness, aside from those rescued by Thea, to do so, though he might not have wanted this humiliating first place. Seeing Barbara rush over, they instinctively embraced. As he listened to his girlfriend recount the bizarre events of the night, he felt a surge of shame. He felt he hadn't contributed at all, only to become a burden. This was a difficult situation for his pride. Catwoman saw the couple together and naturally couldn't go up to them to cause trouble. After all, she was Batman's mistress, a sort of sister-in-law, an elder. If they got intimate, it would be inappropriate for her to witness. She decided to stay away. Just then, she saw 2 officers, holding their heads and feet, carrying a man with 3 arrows lodged in his body out of the car. Oh, this must have been Thea's doing, right? She'd never seen her properly shoot an arrow, but she was the only one in the world, not even Gotham, still using a bow and arrow in a fight. Since she had some free time, she decided to take a look at her record. The wounded were wearing familiar attire, the standard Scarecrow team uniforms, complete with body armor and helmets. These body armor had given Barbara and her considerable trouble. She fought tooth and nail, taking down 4, while Barbara traded wounds for 3. Although she wasn't injured, she was incredibly exhausted, and it would take at least half a day to fully recover. Perhaps driven by a woman's tendency to compare herself, she approached and examined the wounded. She saw that all of them had been shot in the limbs, and she felt a pang of satisfaction. It seemed Thea had been severely challenged by these men's defenses. Her archery skills were indeed quite good, though. Catwoman observed the wounds. These weren't the high-tech arrows she'd used before, but pure archery. Her ranged attacks were somewhat weak, so could she learn? Catwoman quickly abandoned the idea. Her fighting style was already well established, and adding archery wouldn't help her much. Besides, she couldn't even shoot. Batman theoretically should know, but she'd never seen him use a bow, and she didn't know who to turn to if she wanted to learn. Catwoman, initially hunched over her shoulders, watched the officers carry the wounded downstairs, her expression quickly shifting from initial composure to surprise, then finally to a state of shock. How had she single-handedly taken on so many enemies? 30 wounded were already lying on the ground, all wounded with arrows, some with 4 or 5 wounds, some with 2 or 3. From a distance, It looked like a film studio, with extras sprawled out after filming a war scene in an ancient drama. Officers were already on the truck, ready to extract the arrows, but Thea and her team had designed their arrows with the idea of wounds being difficult to heal and bleeding profusely, not considering post-operative care. Therefore, all her arrows were barbed. Leaving them untouched was fine, but forcing them out could be fatal. A certain unfortunate officer encountered this very situation. His finger-sized wound, after a sudden tug, became a hole the size of his arm. Blood gushed out like a fountain. Luckily, thanks to the excellent teaching quality of the Gotham Police Academy, he used his limited first aid knowledge to find a rag to plug the wound, barely saving the criminal's life. This scene was witnessed by many people, and none of the other officers dared to pull out the arrow. If they didn't, he would still be alive, but if they did, who would be the one to die? Although officers had an annual quota for killing a certain number of people without conviction, they didn't want to waste it here. Since it hadn't been stuck in their bodies, they could just carry it with them. In desperation, the officers transported these suspected Hengdian extras back to the camp in their original form. They spread the arrows all over the floor, preparing to call for paramedics to help them. Chapter 84 Unspeakable Comparison. The serious police medical staff had long since scattered during the previous urban riots. This time, they were joined by members of the Sky Eye Society's lab staff and a few agents with battlefield first aid experience, donning white coats to impersonate angels in white. These men, skilled at treating gunshot wounds and electroshock, were startled by the sight of so many arrow wounds. When the officers handed them 2 plastic bags of severed limbs, they were stunned. This workload would require overtime even in a hospital with thousands of people, but with just a few of them? How long would it take them? Fortunately, criminals held little human rights in the eyes of the police. A few officers tossed the severed limbs aside, implying they could reattach them if they could, but if they couldn't, it wasn't a big deal. A few deaths wouldn't matter, as long as there weren't too many. Instantly understanding what the police meant, the former agent, now a medical staff member, knew what was going on and silently decided the fate of the mentally and physically disabled individuals on the ground. It just so happened that the Disabled Persons Federation was organizing the Paralympics this year, and these physically fit individuals could push their labs forward, breaking 17 or 18 international conventions, secretly modifying their equipment and sending it to compete, potentially bringing glory to their country. The smell of blood at the scene interrupted Barbara and Robin's heartfelt conversation. Robin was dazed and didn't understand what had happened, but Barbara knew exactly what had happened. She did all this, as far as I know, she's the only one skilled in archery still in Gotham, Catwoman said, looking at the 2 bags of severed limbs, a grimace on her face, as if recalling some unpleasant experience. Barbara was completely speechless. She counted the men on the ground, a full 30. While some didn't look like criminals by the look of them, since they were all there, they must be accomplices. She imagined Thea facing over 30 people, arrows whizzing like locusts, whizzing through them like a tsunami, turning them into this horrible mess. Then she recalled how Thea had appeared unharmed when she entered the command vehicle. Had she fought over 30 people unscathed? Barbara was stunned by this realization. She wasn't in top form today, and while it was a struggle to take on 3, her limit was 5. With 30 people charging at her, only Batman could handle it. Perhaps her own strength wasn't that great? Thea wondered if this tricky performance had made Barbara even less confident, but she quickly pulled herself together. Since she wasn't as good as the others, she'd better catch up. She'd definitely train hard when Batman returned. When Catwoman and the others returned to the command vehicle, they found the culprit of the Gotham Highway tragedy, slumped unassumingly on the table, fast asleep. By this time, Thea had changed into her usual attire. Unsure of the upcoming battle, and feeling the stifling heat inside the car, she wore only a short, arm-bearing tank top and shorts, with flip-flops on. She slept soundly, her head tilted to one side. Her long legs shone brightly in the car's interior. Robin, still barely recovered and with surprisingly low immunity, couldn't help but glance at them a few times. Ahem, Barbara glared at her boyfriend, wondering if he was really that much more capable than her. Her languid demeanor shook her once firm resolve. Wake up, don't sleep, Catwoman nudged her. Who is this? Put the meeting documents on my desk. I'll sign them later, Thea mumbled, her head drooping again without even noticing the others. A thought welled up in their minds, this guy probably works this way in Star City. It's a classic capitalist style. Underlings toil away in the elements while their boss sleeps soundly in the house. It's a wonder her group hasn't collapsed. Sleep off. We still have things to discuss. Catwoman once again acted as an alarm clock, this time shaking Thea by the shoulders instead of pushing. Thea had just dreamt she was in the Hulkbuster armor, punching Superman and stepping on Aquaman, daunting the Justice League when she suddenly felt the ground shake. It took her a moment to realize it wasn't an earthquake, but someone shaking her. Selina, stop it. Thea rubbed her eyes, looking listlessly at the others. Talk, she said before her eyes caught sight of Robin, realizing a man had suddenly appeared. She wasn't wearing much, so wouldn't he have seen everything? Previously, the team had been almost entirely female, and the old director, at his age, had automatically excluded the men from the team. She subconsciously felt safe, so she dressed so lightly. Now, seeing Robin, a man, she felt the urge to explode. I need to change, you get out, she spat out, almost word for word. The "you" in her words was easy to understand. The two women also felt uncomfortable with their clothes, half covered in blood and half covered in mud. Seeing Thea change into casual clothes, they were also a little tempted, and simultaneously stared at Robin with piercing eyes. Get out. Poor Robin didn't even realize what was happening. The three women's dazzling gazes forced her out of the command vehicle, and she instinctively stepped outside, wondering, how did I end up outside? As the annoying person disappeared from sight, the three women immediately began to change clothes, and naturally, there was no shortage of body comparisons. Each one pretended to be nothing, but their peripheral vision was focused on the other two. She has such good skin, she's so big. As the three women silently compared themselves, each one silently examined the other two thoroughly. The process was incredibly erotic, involving many unspeakable areas. You can imagine it yourself, so I won't go into detail here. Thea was dressed more formally this time, in short-sleeved capri pants and flats, her long, brown-black hair casually draped over her shoulders. Catwoman and Barbara had also changed into casual clothes, though Catwoman's style was the most daring, sporting a tight-fitting top that Thea found suffocating. It made her wonder, don't you feel tight when you wear this? Clothes are supposed to be comfortable, so how can you even rest in them? But dressing and eating were personal choices, and she had no right to interfere. With a sigh, she pulled out her phone and contacted the old director and Lila and the others. She also called Felicity, who had previously found the place uncomfortable and had gone to sleep in another RV. They arrived quickly, and as they entered, Robin, who had been acting as security outside the door, cautiously followed them inside, figuring there was no danger. There are still more than 100 people missing from the camp. The old director had been counting the number of people. Before, 1/3 of the city was recaptured, and hundreds of people were living in the residential areas on the campus. People moved in and out every day. This number was really difficult to count. He checked it 3 times before he came up with this number. Chapter 85 Talia is going to cause trouble. Thea pondered for a moment, then instructed Felicity, check the campus surveillance and the surrounding roads. It didn't take long to locate the men. Last night at 3:15, 3 trucks left the campus, heading north on 6th Avenue. They haven't been seen since. Felicity, though still a little groggy, quickly discovered some clues. Over 100 people. Thea rubbed her head, tempted to just let them go, perhaps treat them to dinner, but how could that be possible? If they kidnapped over 100 people from their own side, wouldn't they have taken many more from elsewhere? It was inevitable, even with a shrewd guess. Their ambitions were so ambitious that she couldn't resist even if she wanted to. After a moment's deliberation, she said, first, ask Commissioner Gordon to dispatch the department's best officers to the last known location to search for wheel tracks, witnesses, and any other leads. Thea glanced at the old commissioner. The police were professionals in this area, and she wasn't much of an outsider to guide the experts. Secondly, have the researchers from the Sky Eye Society test the substance in the gas masks. This substance should be specifically designed to absorb nerve gas from the air. Extract it, then create a dedicated gas meter. Go to the scene to determine where the concentration is highest, and map out the enemy's escape route along the way. Although Lyra didn't fully understand, she understood roughly 70% and nodded. Finally, it's you guys. We've captured quite a few prisoners, so you should be able to extract some clues. Thea looked last at the 3 generals from Batman's family and friends. This was their traditional method, to find clues and capture a criminal, then beat them to death. Honestly, Thea thought it was a foolish method, But to give them something to do, she assigned it anyway. Her words resonated with them. They didn't want to go on the streets or run around like idiots with instruments. Torture was their usual style. They had whips and daggers readily available. They were skilled and experienced, and hanging prisoners and beating them was the job they were best suited for. That's it, then. Let's split up. After arranging everyone's tasks, Thea prepared to part ways with him, burying her head under the covers and falling into deep sleep. She wondered if she could resume the sweet dream that Catwoman had interrupted. With a bang, the door of the command vehicle flung open, and a tall, white-haired, elderly black man ran in. Who is this? Thea's first reaction was that her true identity had been discovered. Should she quickly silence him or knock him out and abduct him? But she soon realized that none of the people in the vehicle showed any sign of surprise. This man didn't seem to be an enemy. Lucius, what's going on? Commissioner Gordon was puzzled by the old man's presence at this hour. Thea immediately thought of Voldemort's Death Eaters or something, but she quickly realized that this black man wouldn't pull out his wand and blast her with a green light. She had seen his picture before, not in memories from that world, but a while ago when she was working at Quinn Enterprises. His name seemed to be Lucius Fox, either the president or vice president of Wayne Enterprises. Seeing him rush in, several people didn't know what happened, and they turned back to go out. James, something happened, you have to find a way. The old black man was out of breath. And the kind-hearted Felicity quickly handed him a glass of water. Thank you. The old black man looked at the girl in front of him and found that he didn't know her, but now it was urgent and there was no time for courtesy, so he grabbed the old director and wanted to run out. Seeing that the two old men were almost 120 years old in total and looked like they were about to elope, Thea hurriedly stopped them. Sorry, what happened? Can you tell me? I just assigned the old director a task and you dragged him away. Doesn't it make you look very embarrassed? Lucius found that he didn't know this girl, and was a little confused for a moment. Could it be that I entered the wrong door because of my old age? He surveyed the command vehicle, then looked around at the people inside. He knew most of them. This was puzzling. Commissioner Gordon had always been a steady hand, or, to put it bluntly, someone without quick wits. He was fine with following the rules, but he was completely flustered by any unexpected situation. He didn't think he could be of much help to the old black man's urgent matter. On the contrary, he admired Thea's cleverness and wit. Lucius, what's going on? Don't worry, they're all trustworthy young people, okay? Although I don't think you can help, I received word that Talia is planning to hold a board meeting this morning to announce Bruce's disappearance and determine her son's inheritance rights to Bruce's shares. We're at a loss for a solution, so, everyone in the car fell silent upon hearing this news. Lila and Felicity remained indifferent. They knew the child was indeed Batman's son, and there was no problem with the inheritance. Gordon, his daughter, and Robin also felt that this was someone else's family affair, and it was inappropriate for them, outsiders, to get involved. They also had no legitimate reason to intervene. Talia had acted decisively, leaving no room for error. Using the League of Assassins intelligence network, she'd spread the word that the child was Batman's. Superman, Martian Manhunter, and the rest of the gang hadn't found Bruce himself, otherwise they'd have flown over to offer their congratulatory gifts. This whole thing had to be a hoax. Catwoman wasn't as helpless as the others. Her face was grim, her knuckles cracking, and she wanted to hit someone but didn't know who to hit. Lucius, we want to stop this, but there's really nothing we can do. Commissioner Gordon, unsure what to say to his old friend, managed a couple of evasive responses before trailing off. Can I interrupt you all? Don't you all want Talia's son to inherit his father's shares? Who among you is involved in this? Seeing they all looked like their father had died, Thea wanted to ignore it, but she didn't want to affect her future plans, so she asked anyway. Lucius knew Talia's move was ruthless and nearly unstoppable, so he came to Gordon with the intention of trying his best. But in response to Thea's question, he casually replied, Alfred and Selina will object too. Catwoman would definitely object. She almost wanted to kill him with a machete. Her hatred was as high as the sky and as deep as the sea. Although she wasn't with Batman for money, her personality made it impossible to suppress the rage of seeing a pile of money that belonged to her just float past her and land in someone else's pocket. Barbara, despite her beef with her, also made her position clear, opposition. She took the lead in the opposition, and Robin also changed his neutral stance to opposition. I'm against it too, but our opposition is useless. Gordon said, expressing his support for his old friend. Chapter 86, Enemies in Arkham. Since you all oppose it, what if Mr. Bruce comes back and agrees? Will he be angry that we've made the decision for him without his permission? Seeing their heated expressions, Thea asked, hoping that Master Bruce wouldn't take revenge later. Do you have a plan? Don't worry about Bruce's problem. He won't agree. Even if he agrees, we can't do anything about it if we oppose him. Lucius, after all his years as CEO, was adept at reading people's expressions. Seeing Thea's composure, a glimmer of hope rose in his heart. As for Master Bruce's revenge later, he wasn't afraid at all. Everyone in this room was either his friends or his comrades. There was no way he would go against their collective opinion. Well, actually, I don't think it's a big deal, Thea pondered, convinced that it wasn't a big deal. Lucius's despairing expression suggested only that his thinking was limited. I don't know if you know, but I own shares in the Wayne Group, Thea said slowly, holding up a finger. She had only just learned this a while ago. When my father was alive, he bought 0.5% and 0.7% of Wayne Group shares from me and my brother respectively. Of course, these shares were not directly in our names. After my brother passed away, the shares automatically came to me, so I have a 1.2% stake. You want to initiate a shareholder no confidence motion to reject Talia's legal inheritance rights? But your shares are still too few. Lucius was too lazy to think about how this girl got shares in Wayne Group. He had been working like a slave for many years, and with the money Bruce plundered from the board of directors, he also held almost 1% of the group's shares. It seemed like a small amount, but considering the scale of Wayne Group, it was a lot of money. It's quite a bit, but our Quinn Group holds a 3.5% stake in Wayne Group, and Merlyn Group has a similar stake. I can help you secure these as well. Mr. Lucius Fox, let me introduce myself. I'm Thea Quinn, the old black man, feeling the world was changing a bit too quickly, took off his reading glasses and looked at the girl before him. He had indeed never seen her before, so he hesitated and asked, Is Moira Quinn yours, my mother? This was something everyone on Earth knew, and Thea answered readily. Oh, I've met both your mother and Mr. Steele. I never expected that. Lucius and Moira were just nodding acquaintances. He had a good relationship with Steele, the black man who had almost become Thea's stepfather. Perhaps it was because black people had a common language. Thea didn't know what to say about his acting like an elder. She was indeed quite old, and Steele would usually call her uncle or grandfather. Her own generation was even lower, so she didn't intend to engage in small talk. She simply nodded and smiled, signaling him to continue. But it's still a little short. Our board of directors' veto power must reach 15% of the shares. The old black man collected his thoughts and returned to the practical issues. That's not difficult. Let me introduce you to Miss Leela over here. She's a key government official and can indirectly influence some companies. They should also hold some shares in the Wayne Group, Thea said, pointing to Leela, who was watching the show nearby, but she didn't introduce her as an agent, vaguely referring to her as a government official. Leela had always served in the military and didn't understand the modern corporate system with its intertwined practices. She hadn't realized what role she could play in this matter before, but now that Thea mentioned it, she immediately realized what she meant by influencing companies. That was basically a government company. Well, she could just make a few calls. I wouldn't guarantee that everyone would obey, but I think she could get 7 or 8 of them to respond. Besides, if she couldn't do it herself, she still had Amanda. It was a simple undertaking, and the favors were plentiful. It only took a few phone calls, no risking one's life. It perfectly suited her current mission to provide timely assistance. Without asking Amanda for permission, she nodded in response to Lucius's pleading gaze, indicating she could do it. Then, under the gaze of the entire room, Thea made 2 calls, one to her mother and one to Malcolm. Although they had their doubts, they shrugged it off and gave her the phone numbers of several Wayne shareholders, assuring her they were close friends and that she could contact them without hesitation. Leela was even quicker, contacting 3 or 4 companies. The 2 women and Lucius eyed aside and counted their shares, easily exceeding 15%. Remember, Alfred, as the Wayne family's longtime steward, also held some shares, albeit a very small one. The group pieced together the task. Mr. Lucius, you still need to submit the proposal. We're only there to support it. You must understand that. Thea wrote down 2 phone numbers for the old black man and told him to contact them. If one's family speaks too much in another's company, it can easily trigger a chain reaction. This is a matter of rules. Undermining this foundation can easily lead to others imagining things like, are you, the Quinn family, trying to increase your influence? Are you planning a hostile takeover? This is something Thea absolutely hates. I understand. The old black man understood this. After all, he hadn't been eating rice for free all these years. With a look that said, I'll take the blame, and you'll die, Thea sent Lucius away, who had arrived with a swagger and left with a fluttering gait. The room full of people watched her effortlessly resolve a previously daunting problem in less than 10 minutes, all looking at her like a wealthy tycoon. Why are you looking at me? Isn't this perfectly normal? This is the state of our country. Mr. Bruce also holds shares in our Quinn group. Don't just stand there, get back to work. Frustrated by their gaze, Thea quickly reminded them that there were citizens in the hands of the criminals waiting to be rescued. The group then dispersed, each going about their own business. Catwoman was irritated, her conviction growing stronger that she needed to work harder and harder to amass wealth after this incident. Robin, hugging his girlfriend, walked to a quiet spot, still whispering, "How much do you think she has?" "Definitely more than you." Barbara had returned to the campus, already unearthing her equipment and whipping it with a few blows, ready to vent her frustration if the prisoner remained silent. Thea, who hadn't known how many of her friends had been hurt by her seemingly invisible display of wealth, directed Felicity to control the drones and search for clues, while she calmly retreated to the RV to rest. At lunch that day, the group met again, not to eat, but to review various sources of information. Old Gordon, who had somehow transitioned from team leader to intelligence chief, summarized the information they had gathered. There are missing persons in every district. The exact number is hard to pinpoint, but their bases aren't concealed, Commissioner Gordon said, pulling out a map and pointing to a location. This was it. Several Gotham locals inside the house gasped in confusion. Unaware of the situation, Thea asked the foreign support team, "How do we know where this is?" "With nothing written on this map, this is Arkham Asylum." Chapter 87 Investigation. Even Thea and Lyra, not locals, were a bit surprised by the name. To say it resounded throughout the multiverse was a bit of an exaggeration, but it was undoubtedly a name that resonated throughout America. Arkham Asylum, just listen to that resounding name. This wasn't just hype for attention, it was a place of no return for countless men, both those who weren't yet insane and those who had already gone mad, who had forged it with their brains and lives. As a landmark in Gotham, Arkham Asylum, along with Blackgate Penitentiary, was a prime training ground for young men aspiring to a career in the underworld. If a promising young man could obtain both a Blackgate release certificate and a stable medical status from Arkham Asylum's mental health committee, he or she would have no problem applying for a job with Penguin or one of the city's 5 major crime families. These two places were like martial arts schools and magic schools in some novels. Blackgate focused on combat training, while Arkham provided spiritual guidance. For most hardened Americans, Blackgate's teachings were child's play. Arkham was the place where true transformation truly took place. Suddenly, hearing that a large group of criminals had gathered in such a terrifying place, capturing countless civilians for either mental or physical transformation, was a dreadful news that gave Thea a headache. Seeing Barbara, always eager to offer advice on such matters, frowning beside her, Thea knew they were feeling a bit apprehensive. Yes, without the golden-legged Batman, the Alts were going straight from a 5-player raid to a group-based one. Not only were they apprehensive, but she herself felt a bit insecure. But she was the leader of this raid, a place she hadn't known for a long time, and she couldn't let them down. At this moment, her old comrade was the most reliable. She instructed Felicity, "Send out the drone, conduct reconnaissance, and bring the live feed to this car." Felicity said, "Oh," and happily went about her business. Her optimistic attitude suggested she didn't know if Arkham had had much of an impact on her, or if she was just naturally reckless. "Chief, do you have a map of Arkham? Let's discuss an attack route." "What? Can we avoid attacking?" Of course they could. Thea didn't want to go. She wished she could just contact Amanda and send a Hellfire missile to the comrades at the asylum. It would be safe, quick, and worry-free. How wonderful. But she was now a hero on the side of justice, a kind of leader. She couldn't say that. If they all refused to go, she could just reluctantly go along with it. But for Commissioner Gordon, who had a perfect sense of justice, and Barbara, who had a 99% sense of justice, nothing would come out of their mouths. Commissioner Gordon excitedly brought a pile of blueprints as Thea stared at him with regret. She wondered who had planned the city. Arkham wasn't just a wooden house, it was a vast administrative district, like Chaoyong in Pudong. It was massive. Thea examined the map of the insane asylum. This place, let's call it a hospital, was also enormous, far exceeding the typical hospital size. It covered nearly 100,000 square meters, with a building area difficult to calculate, but it could be estimated at around 150,000 to 200,000 square meters. Everyone, come and see, I'm already outside the gate. Felicity flew the drone over the asylum like a remote-controlled airplane. Several people quickly walked over to the display screen and paused to observe. This was Thea's first time seeing this famous building. From the outside, it didn't have that hellish, terrifying aura. Like all Gotham City architecture, it was dark, dilapidated, old, and filled with a kind of hysterical restlessness. Nothing special, exclaimed the heartless Felicity. She curled her lips and expertly activated her stealth capabilities, thermal imaging, and cornering avoidance, among other features. As the drone descended, the group gradually gained a clearer view of the insane asylum. To describe it as overcrowded was an understatement. 5 armed criminals, densely packed in an area less than 100 square meters, patrolled the area. In less than half a minute, 3 patrols passed through the area. Felicity didn't dare descend too low. Optical camouflage would make it invisible to most, but the drone's noise couldn't be masked. Unable to enter the house, she piloted the drone in a semicircle around the courtyard wall. Fortunately, they had thermal imaging technology. As Felicity continued to follow the wall, Thea and the others consulted the old map, searching for the best attack point. There are too many people here, Thea muttered, poring over the map. The red dots on the thermal image alone numbered several thousand. Perhaps only 1/10 of them were criminals? That was still a staggering number, and their 5-person team couldn't defeat that many. Wait, fly back a little, Chief Gordon, seemingly observing something, called out to Felicity. A faint figure appeared on the screen. It was inside the house. The drone's camera, peering through the window glass, produced a blurry image. Can you zoom in a little? The chief squinted, unable to confirm. The same goes for magnification. This is a commercial device, not for military use. But we have another method. This was developed specifically for the Star City Police Department by our Quinn group. It's a shame someone messed with it, Felicity said as she casually activated the facial recognition software, glancing at Catwoman. Catwoman looked embarrassed and winked. Why do you keep bringing this up? Didn't we already cover it? The computer quickly compared the photos, quickly finding a clear headshot next to the blurry ones. 95% similarity. It's this guy. His name is really strange. Oswald Cobblepot. Felicity, a pen in her mouth, looked at the results from the computer, feeling that the man looked strange and incongruous. Several Gotham locals exchanged somber glances, their expressions somewhat grim, and they chorused, "Penguin, continue investigating." Thea didn't find this guy anything to fear. He possessed no superpowers, his martial arts skills were mediocre, his height was tragic, and he had a limp. Why should they be afraid of him? She felt she'd be bullying him even if she attacked him. As they continued their aerial patrols, they gained a rough understanding of the perimeter's security. It's worth noting that not only were the Scarecrow elites they dealt with before present, but also numerous gang members. According to the old chief, these were all Penguin's men. He had briefly unified Gotham's underground forces, and while his power was diminished, he still retained a loyal following. Chapter 88 Mr. Freeze. A single glance at the perimeter of the asylum revealed the diverse criminal mix. There was a wide variety of attire, from elite soldiers in American-style gear to small-time thugs in tank tops and shorts wielding axes, and even more deviant individuals grinning foolishly at trees. Felicity, with her thermal imaging system on, piloted the drone like a video game, her eyes gleaming. Carefully avoiding all sources of heat, she dodged and relayed information to the command vehicle. Bang! The screen shook. What had happened? Before they could grasp what was happening, a man in spacesuit-like armor, clutching an enormous, sci-fi-inspired firearm, appeared in front of the camera. The strange man paused for a moment before understanding the situation. With a grim smile on his face, he raised his weapon to the screen. A puff of gas erupted, and the signal in the command vehicle went black. Mr. Freeze, 3 voices rang out simultaneously. Felicity, as if a beloved toy had been snatched away, pouted and dropped the controller, lazily slumping onto the nearby sofa. Thea had a vague impression of this man, a scientist driven to save his wife, but further confirmation was needed. She remained silent, gazing sternly at the Gothamites, awaiting their explanation. Commissioner Gordon, already ripping a fistful of hair, pondered the inquiring gazes from the Star City duo. This is Mr. Freeze. His real name is Victor Freeze, a scientist and expert in cryogenics. He was conducting research on human cryogenics to freeze his terminally ill wife. An accident later caused a massive mutation in his body, turning him cold-blooded. That's why your drone didn't see him. He's already cold. Commissioner Gordon recalled the information he had and briefly recounted the man's past. Now that Mr. Freeze is also in Arkham, Scarecrow can't be the leader. There must be someone higher up directing them, Barbara added. This had occurred to Thea since she'd seen the Penguin. How could a former Gotham underworld king listen to a former university professor? And vice versa? Seeing Mr. Freeze only confirmed her point. She'd already seen 3 famous sub-bosses. Could there be other villains? Thea felt, according to Murphy's Law, that there were probably more. Was it because she'd gone against the grain, rallying the citizens to resist instead of the usual superhero-style point-and-shoot approach, that the world consciousness was turning against her? Was it gathering all the villains together to attack her? Was that even remotely possible? Thea rested her right hand on her cheek, looking at the villains on her side. She was a top-tier hero, while the rest were second-tier. Considering the hidden boss, the good side was clearly outmatched. Furthermore, Arkham's terrain was complex, and she had to fight head-on, unable to escape. She was troubled. Was a people's war the only option left? She thought over and over again, thinking that they couldn't defeat so many villains by themselves, and the villains all had their subordinates with them. Barbara and the others had difficulty defeating 3 or 5 elites before, and there were probably hundreds of them here. If they rushed in without help, they wouldn't even make a splash. Thea looked at Gordon and said, Chief, if we want to rescue the people in Arkham, we have to make a maximum mobilization. We can't rely on just a few of us. What do you mean? Call up all the police officers and ask citizens who have served in the army to hand over their weapons. You can use the name of the municipal bureau or the municipal government. We need a large number of controllable armed forces. After Thea finished speaking, she glanced at Leela and said, Sky I will cooperate with us to find those whose mental illnesses are not so serious. The American people are actually very tragic. A bunch of politicians with holes in their brains are ridiculed by the whole world, and then there is conscription. Therefore, there are many citizens who have served in the army and fought in wars. Those who have no connections and no ways save their lives on the battlefield. After returning home, those who have no jobs and no wives began to feel uncomfortable in various ways. Many people embarked on the path of criminals again. Among them, there are famous ones such as Deadshot, and there are countless unknown ones. Thea hesitated to arm these people. Battlefield syndrome, combined with the aura of Gotham, made her seem perfectly healthy. She'd always relied on the police as the primary force, with a few reputable citizens serving as auxiliary forces. This time, she had no other choice but to let them make the most of their remaining energy, serving as quality cannon fodder. She then instructed Felicity to deliver a mobilization speech from the mayor, calling on the passionate citizens to stand up for justice and truth. Some tales of the American dream, real or not, were played on a loop throughout the city's radio and television systems. What? The mayor was still in Bane's hands? Of course Thea knew that, but wouldn't the general public be unaware? For a former hacker, splicing videos wouldn't be easy. As for whether Bane would use the mayor to propagandize himself, Felicity, who controlled Gotham's many satellites, wasn't afraid. While Bane was known for his ingenuity, his intelligence lay in schemes and conspiracies, not computer networks. Thea felt Felicity could outmaneuver 100 Banes online. No one objected to her audacious propaganda. After all, the mayor wasn't much of a problem. Whether he was killed by Bane or impeached by Congress, it had nothing to do with him. They could recruit as many cannon fodder as they could, but the main force was still a bit thin. Thea looked at Batman's family and friends and asked, Can you find some allies? Barbara and Robin, both new to the game and not much fresher than Thea, shook their heads, saying, We only have each other, no room for outsiders. Catwoman hesitated. I'll try to find some friends, but my hopes aren't high. Of course, if she had friends everywhere, why would she have come all the way to find Thea? Those friends she had were mostly for her, rarely for her. Raise the straw, Kill the rabbit, Thea nodded, not holding out much hope for her so-called friends. Seeing the others go off to run their own errands, Thea and Lila stepped aside. Thank you for your help, Lila. I don't know what I would have done without you. Lila could tell it was a polite remark and smiled, waiting for her next words. Do you have any technological weapons in the sky that could knock everyone in Arkham out, like the poison gas we used last night? Thea sincerely didn't want to charge in and engage in a brutal, hand-to-hand fight. That would be foolish. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Take You to Fly. Lila genuinely didn't know what Thea was asking. First, despite her high rank, her duties were primarily administrative. She had no access to the society's core secrets. Even if she did, they would be under various code names, and she wouldn't know the specifics of what she was handling. She could only vaguely reply, no, truly not. We're a compassionate, conscientious, and responsible government organization. We haven't even spent a minute researching anything inhumane like poison gas. Thea, having heard her question, assumed she wouldn't dare speak without further ado. She didn't need to embarrass her. You can't develop a whole system like I can, she said. They said goodbye, and Thea went to see the scientists at the society, hoping to see if there were any existing weapons she could adapt with her own creative ideas for use in the offensive. However, ideals are always beautiful, but reality is cruel. After an entire afternoon of toiling away, Thea achieved nothing. The mention of poison gas made the scientists' heads shake like rattles. No matter how Thea talked about life and reason, they just didn't have it. But from their expressions, Thea knew they definitely had it, and quite a bit, but they refused to reveal it. Lila even said all the agents were ready to go, even if they all died, but she wouldn't mention the use of poison gas. Seeing them all say that, Thea felt helpless. Since you say you don't have it, I'll just assume it's not there. If poison gas isn't an option, how about sonic weapons? After studying the asylum's exterior load-bearing walls and various partitions, they concluded that they had been built with the utmost care and materials. The walls were incredibly thick. A C4 bomb that could blow their command vehicle skyward might only knock down half a wall in Arkham. The walls absorb 90% of sound waves, unless they dropped a bomb in every room. But with hundreds of rooms here, sonic bombs would be prohibitively expensive and impractical. Similarly, magnetic bombs were abandoned. Smoke bombs could be used, but the interior area was too large. A massive smoke bomb covering 100,000 square meters would be necessary, and none of them had the technology to do that. Xiao racked her brains, but couldn't come up with a good solution. She dazed and returned to her room, planning to gather everyone for a brainstorming session tomorrow. Boom, bang, Xiao was slumbering soundly from overwork, dreamless sleep, when she suddenly heard the sound of explosions. Was someone setting off a firecracker? Is it the Spring Festival? No. What the hell, Spring Festival? It's Christmas here, isn't it? Opening her eyes, a vague thought crossed her mind. Is there another enemy attack? She'd been tossing and turning all night. She mentally cursed Director Gordon. This lousy place you've found is being attacked every other day. I'm so impressed. She hurriedly put on her combat uniform, glancing out a window. Flames were visible from time to time. The campus had evacuated all civilians that afternoon, so there wasn't much chaos to be seen. Thea left the room and went outside. Hey, several important figures were there, which put her at ease. She was terrified of being wiped out all at once. She couldn't live with this life, saving her teammates every night and sleeping during the day. Just as she was about to say, I don't ask who the enemy is, I only ask where they are. She saw Lyra Gordon and several agents draw their pistols and fire into the air. Who are you shooting at? Thea glanced up at the sky, only to see a purple figure looming in the sky, occasionally firing green, unidentified objects at the ground. Who is this? Thea's first thought was a mini-boss from Arkham. After all, judging by his appearance and impressive equipment, he must be a reputable figure. Everyone was helpless against the enemy in the sky, which was very similar to her 3 ins and outs last night. But then she thought, that's not right. You're so fearless, charging in alone? Aren't you afraid of being surrounded? She had been so cautious last night. Could it be that Gotham's bosses are just that fierce? Not bothering to ask for his name, Thea took a quick look and decided he wasn't a tough opponent. "Hold on, I'll take care of him," she shouted to everyone. She jumped onto her skateboard and soared towards an unknown target in the sky. As she got closer, Thea could see the man was dressed in purple striped clothing and wielding a strange gun, continuously spraying green goo at the ground. "So disgusting," Thea gritted her teeth. "You Gothamites are such idiots, dressed so shabbily and disregarding the city's appearance just to do such evil things." She hadn't noticed it when she was below, but once in the air, she realized this man wasn't floating like Thea. Instead, he was carrying something resembling two flamethrowers, firing them into the air every few seconds, using the recoil to briefly stay aloft. He was leaping, each burst reaching 20 meters. Once the kinetic energy wore off, he would burst again, then leap again. And no one knew what fuel his jets were powered by. The exhaust was murky, spewing huge plumes of black smoke with every leap. Thea felt the PM2.5 levels in the area had definitely been raised by this guy. Such an unsightly flight style, and yet he was smirking in amusement. What a joke. Thea felt this guy was invisibly lowering the average for technological heroes and villains. Look at that Mr. Freeze, no matter how evil he was and how many people he killed, his equipment was so sci-fi and sleek. You're just disgraceful, showing off yours in broad daylight. She hadn't slept well already, and this guy's disgusting dinner nearly made her vomit. She was ready to teach him a lesson she'd never forget, so she climbed to higher altitude and flew right over him. There was no other way. This guy was spewing black smoke from his rear end and spraying green water from the front. Who knew if it was poisonous? Thea didn't want to get a smear of it for a souvenir. So, while he was enjoying his leap, she quietly moved to a position just above and behind him. Using arrows against this guy was a bit of a waste, as aerial targets were difficult to aim at. Seizing an opportunity, Thea darted over as he sprayed green water at the people on the ground. The man finally realized something was wrong when Thea was less than 100 meters away. He was still wondering how a flying hero could exist in Gotham when he saw two beams of white light hurtling towards him. Thea didn't know if Batman's team had ever defeated this guy, and she didn't bother asking now. Her own methods worked best for her. She didn't use arrows this time. As she accelerated to within 100 meters of him, she slammed her feet on a mechanism. From each side of her skateboard, two chains, as thick as a child's arm, were attached to special alloy arrows. With two puffs, the sharp arrows pierced the enemy's thighs and shoulders. Resisting resistance, the arrows quickly split into three smaller ones, each firmly grasping its target. The enemy's scream was barely finished before the gust of wind blew back into his mouth. "Don't you like flying? Seeing how happy you were flying just now, Shia is going to be a good person and help others. Sister will take you flying." Chapter 90 Catwoman Causing Trouble. Thea looked at the enemy, pierced from front to back by chains. She knew he wouldn't fall, so she ignored him and climbed to a height of 500 meters. She began flying around Gotham at full speed. 150 kilometers per hour, 200 kilometers per hour, 300 kilometers per hour. When she reached 350 kilometers per hour, she felt a slight dizziness and slowed down slightly. This was even faster than the top speed during her initial test, suggesting her physique was gradually adapting to the skateboard's high speeds. She glanced down and saw the purple-clad figure hanging below, pierced by two chains. He'd passed out by the time Thea had flown halfway across the city. It was unclear whether it was from excessive blood loss or the pressure of the high speed. "Serves you right. You idiot. How dare you show off in front of me? You fly so badly and yet you still have the nerve to come out and hang around. I'll make you crippled if not dead. The thought of flying will haunt you forever." Since the enemy had already fainted, Thea didn't bother flying anymore. She determined her direction and sped back to camp. After dismounting the skateboard, officers arrived to escort the purple-clad man away. However, after a long inspection, they realized the chains had been pierced, and it was doubtful whether he would survive if they were to remove them. Unable to confront the ferocious Thea, they could only look to their boss, Commissioner Gordon, for help. Thea, her perception now increasingly refined, naturally sensed the men's anomaly and flipped a switch on the side of the skateboard. With two swishes, the open arrows closed again, rapidly rebounding into the skateboard. As for the purple-clad man, he didn't bleed profusely, the wounds had frozen during the high-altitude flight, and he wasn't in immediate danger. Thea had recently grasped the unspoken rules of this world's heroes. Sparing death was a sure thing, a given, and inevitable, but a criminal could be severely injured, as long as they survived. If they died in the hospital later, it would be a medical dispute and had nothing to do with the heroes. Batman understood this principle long ago and exemplified it, but the Flash, who hasn't appeared yet, falls into the category of not understanding it. The future Flash was deeply troubled by the no-kill rule, but that's a story for another time. Understanding the rules of the game was undoubtedly good news. Thea had previously feared she'd one day be kicked out of the Justice Camp if she struck too hard, but now with this unspoken rule, things would be much easier. 2 officers took the purple-clad man away for questioning, hesitating before handcuffing him. The man had a fist-sized hole in his thigh, and the bones, muscles, and lymph inside were tangled like mud. Not to mention whether he could escape. His ability to walk normally was a serious question. Everyone prepared to read the statement. Perhaps this man had specific information about Arkham. Since she wasn't feeling sleepy anymore, Thea slowly followed them inside. By the way, who is this guy? After walking a while and finding no one talking, Thea casually asked a question, hoping to chat. Everyone was speechless. You don't know him? You've been dragging him around for half an hour with such a deep hatred, and you don't even know who he is. Director Gordon, the former commander and now deputy commander, quickly explained. His name is Drury Walker, codenamed Killer Moth. He's a multimillionaire. Logically, he hasn't committed any serious crimes. So he shouldn't be attacking us. The old director looked puzzled. The constant stream of enemies was exhausting him. Thea felt a little amused. What about Killer Croc and Killer Moth? They had similar names, so could they be brothers? And they'd both been destroyed by her, coincidentally? One diving, the other flying. They should have been a formidable team. It was strange they hadn't teamed up. But she'd heard the words, and didn't take them seriously. She wasn't afraid of Killer 47, let alone Killer 1 and Killer 2. As the medical staff arrived, Killer Moth gradually regained consciousness. The agents took out 2 ounces of Veritaserum and gulped it down his throat. Less than 3 minutes later, the agent handed the statement to Leela, quickly glanced at the others, and bowed before retreating. This guy isn't from Arkham, he's here to look for stolen property, Leela said, looking at someone with a half-smile. Everyone, including Thea, turned to look at that person. There was no way around it, that person had a history of this sort of thing. No matter what enemy they encountered, they just used their flying dragon and cloud scouting skills, probing them repeatedly until nothing was left before they attacked. Selina? Explain. Thea looked at Catwoman with a strange expression. Haha. That bastard probably planted a tracking device on that painting. Sorry about that. Catwoman scratched her head awkwardly, sticking out her tongue slightly. Thea was speechless. Sister, you're going for the sexy look, aren't you? Why are you acting so cute for no reason? Do you think being cute will get you off the hook? And we told you to get reinforcements, right? Is that how you're going to get them? You're just taunting the monsters and then dragging them back to the camp for a group fight. I'm a bit guilty on my part. Did I go a little too far? They're just here to seize the stolen goods. It's really not a big mistake. Thea carefully scanned the faces of the others. She noticed that while their expressions weren't particularly good, they were all within normal limits. She immediately understood. This kind of thing has happened more than once. It seems Master Bruce has dealt with this before, too. That would relieve her of any worries. Commissioner Gordon calmly ordered the officers to continue questioning. The truth serum was still somewhat potent, and the agents, eager to make a name for themselves, had taken a generous amount. This man wasn't a good person, anyway. He instructed the officers to uncover every possible crime his ancestors had committed, to establish an irrefutable conviction. No one mentioned Killer Moth again, chatting casually about the weather, as if he had never been there. Thea also felt that beating the owner to pulp and then blaming them was righteous and heroic. Was this a connection to someone higher up? If it weren't for Catwoman's connection to Batman, with her meter-long criminal record, she'd be locked up in Blackgate Penitentiary for life. Over the next 3 days, the entire camp erupted in excitement. Officers continued to join the Arkham assault team. Commissioner Gordon was truly respected. A single call had already secured over 300 regular officers and over 200 auxiliary officers. Meanwhile, Felicity's meticulously crafted fake mayoral call-up was broadcast across major television channels. The mayor tearfully denounced the atrocities of Gotham's criminals and his own inability to defend them, urging enthusiastic citizens with military experience to take up arms and defend the city. Commissioner Gordon's phone number and the camp's address were left at the bottom of the screen. I have to say that Gordon is really honest. In just a few days, he gathered more than 200 veterans who participated in many wars. These people hardly needed any training and could fight as soon as they picked up weapons. Leela also secretly ordered her men to investigate the family situation of these people and eliminated more than a dozen people with no family background and gloomy expressions. Chapter 91, Arkham, I. On the third night, Catwoman, the one the people had high hopes for, tricked a reinforcement into arriving. Thea glanced at the person before her. She could only see a small area of skin around her lips and chin, seemingly burned. She was covered up, dressed in a black and yellow outfit, with a large canister strapped to her back and a strangely shaped gun in her hand. Was it a flamethrower? The two bumps on her chest suggested she was a woman. At least Thea didn't recall any man in DC wearing such unspeakable clothing. Before she could ask, Catwoman introduced them, obviously for Thea and the others. The locals knew them. This is my friend Bridget Pike, codenamed Firefly. She'll help us deal with Mr. Freeze. Catwoman then introduced her teammates and the Star City duo, but Thea had the impression they weren't listening, preoccupied. It didn't really matter. Her ability to deal with Mr. Freeze was good news. Thea, having made her name with her frost arrows, was practically powerless against such an ability. Now someone had volunteered to take on Mr. Freeze, and as a commander, she naturally welcomed it. Looking at Firefly's equipment, it was clear her ability was fire. A water-fire clash? It looked like something worth watching. Miss Firefly Pike, perhaps naturally reticent, simply listened to Catwoman's introduction with a blank expression. Just when Thea wondered if she'd spoken, she rasped, "Mr. Freeze belongs to me." The subtext was clear, "I don't care about others, you guys handle it." Thea was a little confused as to where Catwoman had found this quirky friend, or if she was really her friend. She gave Catwoman a helpless look, implying, "You handle it yourself." Catwoman understood her personality somewhat, and knowing she'd been reluctant to see strangers after her burns, she said hello to the others and led her outside to find a place to rest. Just when Thea was thinking of giving it a few more days to prepare, Gordon and Felicity arrived, anxiously demanding, "We must act now." The old commissioner, utterly consumed by his daily grind, was envious of Thea, tucked away practicing archery. "Yes, many people in the city have been taken to the asylum lately, and none have come out," Felicity said anxiously, clutching her iconic tablet. With so many people abducted, the perpetrators must be up to something. And they were clearly not being taken for a treat. With the city in chaos, they wouldn't need any heavy labor. So, they could only have one purpose: human experiments. Unsure of her guess, Thea asked the local commissioner, "What do they need so many for?" "There's a secret laboratory beneath Arkham. Their original project, codenamed Indian Hill, was for human experiments, but it was abandoned years ago," Commissioner Gordon recalled with a touch of nostalgia. "So what are they researching?" "Do you remember?" The Star City duo were curious, especially Felicity. Perhaps it was hackers who all had this insatiable thirst for knowledge. Upon hearing this information, which wasn't even available online, her lips parted slightly, her nostrils quivered slightly, and her eyes sparkled, waiting intently for the director to reveal the answer. Gordon paused. "It's probably an experiment to resurrect the dead, but the results weren't ideal. During the experiment, they fused DNA from various animals into humans, and some people even gained superpowers." Upon hearing about the possibility of gaining superpowers, Thea's immediate reaction was, "Oh my god." After capturing thousands of people and putting them through their paces, only a few hundred would succeed, right? With hundreds of superpowered people swarming over her, she might as well run. But those abilities aren't that strong. "I could handle them one-on-one when I was younger," Director Gordon, whether breathing heavily or perhaps trying to impress them, split the sentence into two parts. Hearing this, Thea's confidence returned. She glanced at the old director's physique, imagining him in his youth. Though it might be a bit offensive to be honest, she thought she could probably fight 7 or 8 of them. If that was all her fighting ability, it wasn't very impressive. But then she thought, 20 years had passed, and who knew how advanced these guys' technology had become. For the sake of caution, she decided to dispatch the troops quickly. "Okay, gather the guys. We'll set out today." Though it was said to be quick, the gathering took a full hour. Thea naturally retreated to the background, leaving all the publicity to the fearless director Gordon. Such a large-scale mobilization couldn't be concealed from the enemy, and Thea and her team didn't intend to. There wasn't any clever trickery, they simply relied on numbers to push through. There were over 300 fully armed regular police officers, along with veterans and a few enthusiastic citizens, totaling over 180. Finally, there were 10 elite agents from the Sky Eye Society. The old chief, observing the bustling crowd, felt a surge of excitement, but knowing the timing was wrong, he briefly addressed the crowd and, with a wave of his hand, marched off. Over 500 people filled 30 vehicles, while Sky Eye Society helicopters prepared for a possible enemy attack from the air. Xia, with her skateboard strapped to her back, didn't join the lookout. Instead, she remained in the command vehicle, discussing attack routes with a few others. There was no other way. The asylum had too many small rooms, and the skateboard wasn't easy to use indoors. In such a large-scale fight involving nearly 1,000 people on both sides, Xia had limited room to maneuver. She positioned herself to snipe the named boss, leaving the rest of the troops to the main force. "We should split up and enter the asylum from 3 directions," Barbara said, visibly more energetic, and began to offer her brilliant ideas again. Thea didn't bother to pay any attention to her. She couldn't get enough of this smartass. "No, we don't know the terrain. Splitting up our forces pointlessly will only lead to the enemy overrunning them." The only person present who could ignore her and possessed considerable operational experience was Lyra, a high-ranking commander in the Sky Eye. Catwoman wasn't thrilled with the idea of splitting up the forces either. If anyone encountered Mr. Freeze, without the Firefly's support, they'd be dead. Thea wasn't so afraid of Mr. Freeze. Seeing him shoot down a plane the other day, something seemed off. He looked incredibly slow shooting down a drone. Perhaps it was a physical issue, but his reflexes were abysmal, even slower than an average person's. The icy air from his gun wasn't very fast either. With her reflexes, she could have pierced his face with an arrow the instant he raised his hand. She just didn't know the protective capabilities of his helmet. And since Catwoman's Firefly had taken the responsibility, Thea remained silent. "Stop arguing. The enemy has already discovered us. Let's charge in through the main gate together. Director Gordon, please arrange a retreat. If things go wrong, we must ensure that the main force can retreat relatively intact." Chapter 92, Arkham, Part 2. Barbara was a bit disdainful of her thinking about retreating before even starting the fight, but for various reasons, she suppressed it. Gordon and Leela, both military veterans, saw nothing wrong with it and briskly went down to arrange their mission. Perhaps it was because the Arkhamians were preparing for an indoor battle. Their massive convoy hadn't been attacked, dashing Thea's hopes of using the attack helicopters to collect a few kills. Near the gate, Leela was about to order the attack helicopters back, but Thea felt it would be a shame to let the heavy artillery go. "Shall we fire a cannon at that gate?" Thea pointed at the rusted gate of the Arkham. If it weren't for the bad timing, she would have wanted to take a picture or leave a note saying someone was here. This place was so famous, it would be a shame not to do something about it. Leela thought she was a bit childish, a bit different from her usual calm demeanor, but figuring that blowing up the gate would make retreat easier, she picked up the pager to contact the operator on the attack helicopter. Whoosh, whoosh, 2 anti-tank missiles accurately blasted the iron gate. The iron gate was so rusted it could break even with an axe, let alone such a ferocious missile. With a loud bang, the crowd waited for the smoke to clear before driving directly into this renowned Gotham landmark. Go, go, go. Numerous officers hopped out of their cars and filed into Arkham in a prearranged formation. The formation was divided into 3 groups. Commissioner Gordon and his 200 officers led the charge, while Barbara and Robin bravely stepped forward to protect the old commissioner. In the middle were Lila and Catwoman, accompanied by agents and over 100 dedicated veterans. Firefly had wanted to follow Catwoman, but Thea was wary of her. What if she was an undercover agent sent by the enemy? Furthermore, she was carrying such a large incendiary canister, she had better hide it. It was so obvious, afraid to be seen. If Thea were an enemy, a single arrow fired from the canister would wipe out most of the 500 or so soldiers. Thea, using the excuse that she was a ranged attacker and needed to hold back to ensure everyone's retreat, dragged Firefly and the remaining police officers to the rear. She suspected the enemy would likely throw a gate or rolling stone halfway through the group, splitting them up and then attacking them separately. So she moved cautiously, constantly watching overhead, fearing a whistle would blow and a hail of arrows would descend upon them. But once everyone had entered the asylum, this scene didn't unfold, leaving her feeling uneasy. Was I being too cunning, or were the enemy just too foolish? Could these people not even be planning an ambush? Indeed, Arkham certainly wasn't planning a sneak attack. Soon, Thea noticed a front group pause. She leaped onto a nearby table and peered into the distance. The two sides were currently occupying an indoor gym, reportedly built with funds from the asylum's health committee. The gym was large, but the surrounding facilities were limited, and the seats in the stands on all sides were badly damaged. Thea pushed through the crowd and reached the front of the group. The enemies before them were divided into two groups. On the left was Scarecrow's elite squad, a familiar sight. Still dressed in their traditional American military uniforms, they were well equipped, but their numbers were small. Less than 30. Behind them stood armed thugs of all colors and attire. On the right stood a short, portly man in a suit holding an umbrella. Such a distinctive figure, Thea recognized him. He must be the Penguin. She was a little skeptical of rumors that his umbrella held a host of deadly weapons. Seeing his limp, she knew that such a brawl between two armies, no matter how powerful, would be limited. Behind the Penguin came a large group of gang members in black suits, estimated at least 200. All of them were armed with pistols, and a few even carried automatic weapons. Now came the stage of what in ancient times would be called challenging the enemy, or talking numbers in modern times. The righteous side would undoubtedly be led by veteran General Gordon. Thea didn't want to engage in such a showdown, which only made her a target. She still valued her life. The villain was the Penguin. Perhaps because Scarecrow's men had been wiped out by Thea and the others, leaving him with no say, the former Gotham professor, now Scarecrow, acquiesced to the fact that his faction was led by the Penguin, though his expression remained somewhat gloomy. "Hey, Jim, old friend," the Penguin said with a forced smile. "Oswald, long time no see," Gordon replied gravely. After the greetings, the two began to defend their own cause, each casting themselves as a victim. One said, "You must release all captives and surrender immediately." The other said, "Arkham has been the territory of our Gotham gang since ancient times. You have no right to interfere with what we do." Both knew the other would not give up easily, but they reluctantly went through with the process. Thea didn't bother listening to their nonsense. She whispered into her dedicated headset, "Everyone, be careful. The enemy's experts haven't appeared yet. Be careful to prevent a sneak attack." They all understood this. Scarecrow had studied for a master's and doctorate at Gotham University, then stayed on to teach and worked his way up to professor. He probably wouldn't even know his way around Gotham. He was skinny as a stick, and without his poison gas, his combat power wouldn't even be 5. Everyone said the Penguin was a capable fighter, but Thea, looking at his small frame and limping appearance, honestly didn't think he was that powerful. The enemy's capable fighters had clearly gone into hiding. What was the point of this if not a sneak attack? Especially with someone as unscientific as Mr. Freeze hiding somewhere, even Thea felt a bit worried and glanced around. Soon, the chiefs on both sides finished their count and returned to their respective camps. Almost simultaneously, they shouted, "Fire!" Bang, bang, the gunfire rained down on both sides like a continuous raindrop. Thea had already found cover, observing the battlefield from a distance and firing a few shots from time to time. Yes, her marksmanship was quite good. After so much archery practice, she had a high level of ranged proficiency. While not perfect, she was still considered elite. She turned around to call out to her teammates, but a glance nearly irritated her. She saw Catwoman and Robin nearby, both holding sticks and looking around. This group was so inexperienced in group combat. At least they could have a gun, just to make a strong impression. Barbara was a great example. She knew it was necessary to bring a gun when going out to kill and burn. Although she didn't hit many enemies, she kept firing. "Thea, how about using magnetic arrows?" Felicity suggested, watching the live broadcast from her base camp. Thea observed the situation and shook her head. "Not yet. We have the advantage. The veterans are very powerful. Those gang members are no match." Just as she thought she had the upper hand and was about to call a few friends to join the battle to expand her victory, I am Azrael, the Angel of Death, a tall and thin man wearing a red and black leather jacket with a hooded cloak and holding a long sword rushed into the police line like a whirlwind, slashing horizontally and vertically, and knocked down 3 policemen with a wave of his hands and feet. Chapter 93, Arkham, Part 3. The tall, lanky man, alone and surrounded by enemies, remained unfazed. With his longsword, he slashed left and right, instantly knocking down 2 police officers and severing the wrist of a veteran. Seeing that the others hadn't reacted, Xia, who was still a bit far away, could only draw her bow and aim at the murderer. Whoosh, whoosh, 2 arrows flew past the man's face and shoulder. The self-proclaimed Angel of Death was truly impressive. In the nick of time, he kicked the police officer to the side, using the reaction force to dodge Xia's 2 arrows. Amazing. This was the first person Xia had faced since her debut who could dodge her arrows. Although her archery skills were only so-so, this man's reaction speed was much faster than that of an average elite. Who is this guy? Xia quickly asked her friends, the subtext being that if you have a strategy, please read it out quickly. He's the former Gotham City Mayor, Theo Galvin. He's been dead for years, but if nothing goes wrong, he's a clone left behind. Commissioner Gordon, a seasoned veteran, stood by with a pistol in hand. Knowing the young people didn't recognize him, he hurriedly introduced him. Oh, Thea let out a long oh. She was initially startled when she heard it was the mayor. Are all your mayors this fierce? Do you mean you can't survive without similar skills? In just a few moments, his clothes were stained red with blood. From the side of his hood, one could see his aged features and a short, steely beard. He roared with each kill. The surrounding officers, overwhelmed by his prowess, unconsciously made room for him. He was relentless, constantly moving, slashing at the slowest runners. Thea observed him carefully. He was quite skilled in martial arts, especially with a certain air of fearlessness. His clothing must have been somewhat bulletproof. Veterans kept firing at him, but he simply dodged his vital parts, seemingly unresponsive to the other bullets. Alice, it looked like she'd have to save the situation herself. Robin and the others had already found their opponents, and there was no guarantee they could defeat this guy. Sighing, she knew that if she showed her skills, her happy days of being a bystander would be over. Get out of the way, Thea shouted to the crowd. Since he was a clone, surely killing him wouldn't matter, right? Of course, she wouldn't rush in hastily. Taking advantage of the distance she still had, she employed rapid-fire techniques, drawing 3 arrows at a time, constantly changing her attack angles while moving swiftly towards the Angel of Death. Snap, snap, this clone of the former mayor had an exceptionally sharp intuition for danger. Despite Thea's constant shifting positions, he was able to react, either slashing with his sword or dodging sideways, causing Thea's first 6 arrows to miss. Seeing his stance, Thea knew she couldn't defeat him with normal means, so she pulled out a batarang she had taken from Barbara. Many members of the Bat family had used this type of dart. However, each dart had a different weight depending on individual habits and strength. Thea was currently using Barbara's batarang, which was a reasonably good size and weight. She swung out a dart, then leaped up and fired another at the back of the Angel of Death's head. The dart was light, and although Thea, with less strength, had shot first, the bowstring's acceleration meant the 2 arrived in front of the enemy almost at the same time. The Angel of Death knew he had no time to dodge and could only choose the lesser of 2 evils. If he was pierced by the arrow in the back of his head, he would definitely not survive. He swung his sword backhand to cut the arrow off and at the same time tried to dodge the dart sideways. But Thea had calculated the angle, so how could he avoid it so easily? Puff, the sharp batarang pierced his left arm fiercely, the leather jacket on his body barely providing any resistance. Clang, he pulled out the dart and glared at Thea fiercely. You are guilty, Thea almost laughed. Do you think you are in a hot-blooded anime? You are quite immersed in the role. At this time, the 2 are only 5 meters apart. She put away her bow and arrow, drew her long unused samurai sword and dagger, and attacked in 2 steps. I'd seen this guy's swordsmanship before, and it had some influences of European court swordsmanship, mixed with many modern fencing techniques. His longsword wasn't the typical 2-handed sword used on the battlefield, but rather a hybrid of a Swiss and Italian longsword. Less than a meter long, the handle was inlaid with ornate ornamentation, and the scabbard, hung diagonally, was adorned with glittering jewels. If it weren't for his showmanship, it would have been a true masterpiece. You'd know for sure if it was a masterpiece by trying it. Many famous swords aren't as sharp as modern alloy steels. Thea's blade and dagger were both made of special steel, having obtained permission from Moira to craft them, using both rare metals. Seizing the moment his left arm was injured, Thea attacked with a swift, upward thrust. With her left dagger, she slashed his cheek from the bottom. As he retreated to avoid it, she used her right katana, a powerful IAI slash, to slice straight into his abdomen. The Angel of Death, holding his sword with both hands, plunged it straight into the ground, blocking Thea's slashing blows and halting his retreat. This was a strange move Thea hadn't expected. As the blades clashed, she felt her katana inexplicably stiffen. She knew she was in trouble. The opponent's sword was indeed a precious one, but the mere passive clash of blade against blade had already chipped her own. Despite the slight disadvantage, Thea felt her fighting spirit surge, her blood boiling. She held the dagger in her backhand, focusing her primary attack on the longsword in her right hand. Her strength was limited, and Japanese sword techniques didn't suit her, so she quickly switched to the Wing Chun 8-slash technique. The 8-slash technique was supposed to be used with a short sword, but that wasn't feasible. The long sword was a makeshift weapon. The 8-slash technique was the polar opposite of Wing Chun. While boxing techniques focused on striking the enemy, targeting the person, the 8-slash technique took a different approach, targeting the opponent's weapon, making it perfectly suited to the situation. Thea then exploited her weapon's slightly longer length, focusing her moves on her opponent's wrists and fingers, stabbing, slicing, and chopping, unleashing the full power of the 8-cut blade. The Angel of Death had never seen such a move before, and he felt frustrated and furious. The unfavorable situation intensified his anxiety, and he kept on spouting, "Sinner. You will be purified by heavenly fire, behold my judgment, crusade strike." As the Angel of Death continued to shout, Thea was a little confused. What was he thinking? He was shouting out names of moves in the middle of a fight? With his hood off and his hair disheveled, he was spitting at her like a madman. This idiot was truly Gotham-esque. Chapter 94, A Dozen Arkham, Part 4. Despite the Death Angel's resounding shouts of his moves, Judgment was merely a downward vertical slash, and Crusader Strike was merely a horizontal slash with diagonal strokes. There was none of the exaggerated spectacle she'd imagined, like the golden glitter and halo beneath his feet. Thea could only make a naive assumption about this guy's bad habits. Was this a side effect of being cloned, or was he just that immature? Thea simply didn't have the time right now, otherwise, she would have asked. Regardless of whether this guy was mentally ill or not, his offensive power was undeniable. He didn't have any golden flashes, but the slashing, slashing, and thrusting movements of his longsword still caused Thea, who was exhausted from dealing with him, considerable distress. He offered no defense at all. After 3 minutes of fighting, Thea had already struck him twice with her longsword. Adding to the previous start, blood gushed from his body, yet he seemed unconscious, battering tirelessly. Holy crap, Thea, who considered herself an honest and polite beauty, was so angry she wanted to curse. If this guy were normal, she would have taken him down long ago. His brain wasn't working properly, and his attention was intermittently distracted, which caused many flaws in his moves. But his fearlessness had evened the score. The mastermind behind cloning this guy must have seen that he was mentally ill and artificially reduced his nerve pain transmission, using madness to compensate for madness. It was truly remarkable. If Thea hadn't cared about her own injuries, she could have taken him down, but she would have been so foolish to trade injuries with a clone. It was simply not worth it. After Thea slashed him from the side again, the Angel of Death, bleeding profusely, became dazed, his attacks weakened slightly, and his voice also dropped slightly. Thank goodness you've finally stopped yelling so loudly. It's been upsetting Thea, making her feel like she's bullying a disabled person. Her initial eagerness was a mistake. Next time, let Robin and the others handle it. She'd rather die than fight him. It's too frustrating. Thinking of Robin, wondering how they're doing, Thea forced the Angel of Death back with 2 moves and surveyed the situation. The firefight was still largely in her favor, with 6-4. The gang members were being beaten back by the combined forces of the police and veterans, but victory was only a matter of time. However, the clash between heroes and villains wasn't quite so rosy. Without Batman's support, his team's effectiveness had unknowingly weakened. And with Thea now entangled with this lunatic, the situation wasn't quite as she'd hoped. Catwoman's battle against the Penguin and a burly man in a pig mask was a close call. Meanwhile, Barbara was surrounded by 6 or 7 elite scarecrows. The fight was fierce, Barbara wielding her whip, hurling darts, and sporadically firing her pistol. Although she had the upper hand, it was exhausting. The expected showdown between Firefly and Mr. Freeze didn't happen, which was good news. These two guys were too deadly for ordinary people. Where was Robin? Thea scanned the arena. Unconvinced, she looked around again and finally spotted Robin in the stands, far away, surrounded by two men. Both wore black suits and owl masks, one wielding twin staffs, the other a long sword. Their skills were exceptional, and their coordination was excellent. They were likely no match for Robin in a one-on-one fight. Now, their combined strength left Robin helpless, unable to defend herself. What was this? The claws of the Court of Owls. Thea was stunned. This was Gotham's hidden boss, right? It wasn't just one or two people. This group was a coalition of Gotham's oldest families, silently watching over the city for 200 years. How had they provoked them? They still didn't have enough intelligence. If it was the Court of Owls working against them, everything would make sense. They'd secretly breached the camp, conducted human experiments, and created clones. They must have enough influence to recruit these unruly villains. A bad feeling settled over Thea. This operation was likely to fail. They had gathered so many villains, surely not just to wipe them out en masse? They must have some hidden trick up their sleeve. She wondered what tactics they might use to break through the situation. Regardless, they had the upper hand. Even if the heroes were defeated, they could just hold off a few capable fighters until the main force was finished. Those few villains would be left waiting for death, their sharpshooting useless against hundreds of guns. As she pondered, her movements naturally slowed down a bit, and the frantic Angel of Death rushed forward again, spouting nonsense. Thea was truly fed up with this dogskin plaster, but she couldn't help but fight. She could only withdraw her thoughts and continue playing the game of dodging 10 times and then slashing once. When Thea once again deflected the Angel of Death's slash, she realized that the katana in her hand was overwhelmed, severely damaged from the multiple swings, and was about to break. She estimated optimistically that she could only make 2 more strikes, and then this special alloy weapon, which had been with her for over a year, would be gone. Holy crap, I'm helping to kill monsters, and my equipment is about to break. Can you guys in Gotham be responsible for compensation? Is it too late to buy insurance now? As she was debating whether to grab a baton from the nearby officer to counterattack, a nearby, unassuming gangster under the Penguin saw Thea retreating into the crowd and, assuming she was losing strength and about to be defeated, rushed forward with a dagger in hand, ready to attack. Huh? The sudden appearance of this guy stunned Thea. She wanted to say, "This is against the rules of the underworld," but seeing the man's expression of bullying the weak, he thought, "Do you think I'm your enemy? If the tiger doesn't show its power, do you think I'm Garfield? And what's with that look? Do you think all the blood on that lunatic across the street is mine?" She was wrongly accusing him. After all, he was a gang member, not blind. It was mainly because Thea, dressed in red, couldn't tell if she was bleeding during the melee. The Angel of Death's fierce attack naturally led to the assumption that she was at a disadvantage. Slightly sidestepping the incoming dagger, it would be a shame not to utilize such a valuable ally. Thea grabbed his wrist and yanked it toward her, tripping lightly. In a normal fight, at this point, one should let go, allowing the opponent to make intimate contact with the ground. But Thea didn't. He grasped the opponent's arm and spun rapidly, using the momentum to fling him toward the oncoming Angel of Death. Everyone should stay away from lunatics, after all. Seeing a figure running toward him, the Angel of Death, without a second thought, stabbed the person in the chest. Chapter 95, Arkham, v. Shia had noticed this problem before. Why did this idiot called the Angel of Death just leap into the crowd without a word and go all out? A more scientific explanation is that this guy has a cognitive impairment, or simply put, he doesn't recognize people. Many huskies that have been raised for a short time also have this problem. They'll disappear in the blink of an eye when the leash is off, and everyone looks the same to them. This guy Shia had been fighting for a long time also had this problem. The owner, or the mastermind behind it, probably took the easy way out when cloning him, copying only the brain memory without instilling much logical analysis. He looks impressive from a distance, but in reality, he's incapable of doing anything. As a bodyguard, he might go berserk and hack his employer to death after 5 minutes. Let him chase his target for half an hour and he might lose contact because he can't find the way. The mastermind must have tried many methods before finally treating this guy as a disposable item. If he's still in the enemy group, just kill him. If he survives, you're lucky. But if he dies, it's not a pity. Now, that was the problem. Driven by immense momentum, the gangster couldn't stop, charging at the Angel of Death with all his might. Puff, the Angel of Death, driven by instinct, didn't realize the charging attacker was one of his own. Perhaps he didn't even have the concept of friendly forces. With one clean stroke, he plunged his sword into the extra's chest. Just as he was about to draw his sword, Thea had already circled to the side. This opportunity was a godsend. The guy's sword was incredibly sharp, he couldn't hold it again. Thea sheathed her dagger, grasping it with both hands. Using a powerful AI slash, she slashed his forearm from top to bottom. Though the Angel of Death's mind was failing, his basic combat instincts remained. Facing the swift blow, if he continued to draw his sword, his arm would be severed. Even with his quickest draw, it would be too late. The human body isn't paper, it has a certain resistance. While his sword could slice through metal like mud, resistance still existed. Furthermore, wounded people automatically clamp their wounds. The Angel of Death exerted a slight force, knowing he couldn't draw his sword in that split second. He could only quickly release his grip and step back, dodging Thea's powerful blow. This guy was finally free. Thea had no sense of a fair fight. She didn't have any of those idiotic "you've lost your weapon, so I'll drop my own and continue training" ideas. She simply focused on how to kill this guy safely, efficiently, and quickly. Without his mighty sword, the Angel of Death was like a toothless tiger. All of Thea's previous concerns were now gone. While his punches and kicks were certainly impressive, that level of prowess depended on the person he was compared to. Compared to Commissioner Gordon, he was quite formidable, but in the eyes of someone of Thea's level, he was utterly weak. The two exchanged swift blows, exchanging 7 or 8 quick moves. Using her vast combat experience, Thea quickly spotted 3 flaws in his form and successfully inflicted 2 cuts on him. As blood continued to flow, his speed visibly slowed, his chattering becoming panting. After all, he was a clone, not a robot, a living being. He had been hacked to pieces by Thea in just a few minutes, and he hadn't fainted despite losing so much blood. This cloning technique was truly remarkable. Knowing victory was within reach, Thea feinted with her left dagger. As he raised his arm to parry, she thrust her right hand straight into the Angel of Death's chest. The rapid loss of blood drained his energy, and his reaction time was now significantly slower. He vaguely saw Thea's thrust and swerved sideways, attempting to avoid a fatal blow. A sharp knife stabbed him in the right ribs. His mind was hazy, and he only knew not to let the enemy continue his attack. Without waiting for her to draw her sword, he grabbed hers with one hand, glaring fiercely at Thea. "Hey, you're playing the hero, huh? Isn't it the heroes who usually seize the enemy's weapon and kill them? The people who cloned you were worried you'd have nothing to do, so they showed you cartoons, right? I'm impressed. You've been fighting for so long and you don't even know how many weapons I have." Thea ignored his wide, bill-like eyes. As he stared in astonishment, her left hand deftly slashed a dagger across his throat. The fierce look gradually gave way to confusion. He clutched his throat with both hands, crimson blood gushing out continuously. He roared and uttered incomprehensible sounds, and the tall figure of the Angel of Death slowly collapsed. Ugh, this guy doesn't know whether to give an honorable kill or not. Are clones actually human? Did he violate the principle of not killing? I'll have to discuss this with Superman if I ever meet him again. Thea discarded the half-broken katana that had accompanied her for over a year, leaving the remaining blade entangled in the Angel of Death. The blade, unsurprisingly, had broken in its final struggle. Though she had dispatched the enemy with a slow-motion replay of her left and right hands, she was still a victim. Bending down to pick up the man's precious sword, Thea assured God she wasn't coveting the sharp weapon, she was simply interested in scientific research, intending to analyze its composition. She then examined the scabbard at the corpse's waist. It was of historical value and appeared quite ornate. With so many gang members present, they surely wouldn't understand the importance of cultural preservation and maintenance. It seemed like this task was hers, so she reluctantly took it back and studied it. Cutting the string from the corpse's waist, Thea seized the scabbard, examining its color. It matched her crimson combat uniform. Given the chaotic situation, it seemed unsuitable for anyone else. She conveniently placed it in her quiver, which had been emptied earlier and perfectly suited for the item. After observing the situation, Barbara was beating several gang members vigorously. It seemed that some kind of attribute was unleashed, and she was just short of shouting "Queen" or something. Robin was still the same, being beaten back and forth by two skilled claw wheels. He could only barely resist. Although it was severe, it was not dangerous. Besides, he was a bit far from the battlefield, so Thea couldn't reach him even if she wanted to support him. This was a good thing. She could just unleash Catwoman's fighting power first, and victory was within reach. Thea drew an arrow and aimed at the Penguin, who was happily fighting Catwoman with a broken umbrella. This guy was a big shot, and the most important thing was that he had the most men in the field. If he died, his men's morale would immediately drop. With this kind of decline, her side would win. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, A Dozen Arkhams, VI. He caught his breath, drew the bowstring to full length, aimed at the Penguin's distinctive pointed nose, and unleashed an arrow. The arrow flew like a meteor chasing the moon, its speed exceedingly fast and its impact pinpoint. If nothing went wrong, the sharp arrowhead would have pierced the Penguin's face. His trusted subordinates would happily attend their boss's memorial service tomorrow, and a new leader would be elected the day after tomorrow. But before the arrow was within 20 centimeters of his unsightly face, a figure darted past, its dark green glove swiftly grabbing the arrow. It wasn't surprising that his arrow had been blocked. After all, his archery skills weren't at the pinnacle of perfection. The Mad Angel of Death had been able to block an arrow before, but catching a high-speed arrow with one's hands was something not everyone could do. Those with great strength and good dynamic vision could do it, but this person before him was clearly not one of those types. She was familiar with her own archery, using the arrow-catching technique traditionally reserved for ninja masters. He also knew this technique, but he hadn't expected to use it before. Today, he encountered a woman who would use it against him. "Talia," Thea whispered, looking at the woman not far away. "Who are you?" Dressed in a dark green leather coat, carrying a recurved bow and arrows, and a long sword slung at her waist, Talia al Ghul studied Thea, wondering, who is this person? Her martial arts and archery skills clearly inherited from a ninja master. Could she be a member of the Alliance? How would Thea answer her question? The story was complex and complicated, so I couldn't go into too much detail. Besides, she wasn't prepared to tell the story in front of so many people. Her face, marked by mixed-race features, was distinct from the pale complexion of European and American people, with hints of Arab and East Asian ancestry. Her thick black hair framed her amber eyes, emitting a strange and dangerous allure. "Defeat me first," Thea, eager to see the difference between herself and this daughter, personally trained by a ninja master and the future mentor of the Green Arrow, quickly drew her arrow, loaded her bow, and fired at Talia. "You need to hone your archery skills." Talia deftly deflected the incoming arrow with a bow. Her words sneered, but her movements were quick. With the same rhythmic speed as Thea, she deflected the arrow. But with Thea's powerful perception, the arrow was as conspicuous as the sun in the sky. She gently took 2 steps to the left, moving out of the arrow's path, while continuing to fire back at Talia. The two then engaged in a performance of unrelenting bow and arrow fire, arrows of nearly identical size and weight constantly colliding in the air. Each of them had to dodge each other's arrows as they charged at the other, occasionally resulting in a classic mid-air collision. In a moment, they exchanged their entire quivers of 20 arrows, neither able to defeat the other. Talia was indeed a skilled archer, but Thea's powerful perception more than made up for any shortcomings. The intense rapid-fire attack took a heavy toll on both their physical and mental strength. Neither of them was in exceptional physical condition, so they simultaneously paused their attacks, catching their breath and gazing at each other, preparing for the next round. At this point in the fight, Talia was completely certain the opponent was using the archery skills of a ninja master. After all, old Ma wasn't some grandmaster, incapable of innovation. He simply taught Thea the same techniques as others had taught him, and the archery style remained unchanged before Talia's eyes. If she couldn't see that, she'd be completely blind. Careful observation, observing the opponent's movements, strength, and speed, revealed a woman, a young one at that. As Talia pondered who this was, her first thought was her sister, Nissa Al Ghul. Having been away from Nandarbit for years, she had no idea how skilled her sister was, but she felt she was similar to the person before her, and they were also very close in age. The age difference between the two sisters meant they didn't have a close relationship, and having left home early with their children, their closeness was even less apparent. Had her sister known of her presence in Gotham and come to confront her? Was her father, the ninja master, also nearby? Feeling uneasy, he ordered his men to remain in ambush and not show their faces. Fortunately, Thea couldn't read minds, otherwise, if she'd known she'd mistaken him for her sister, she'd have roared, "What kind of judgment are you? In terms of figure, temperament, and looks, I'm far superior to your sister." At this point, Thea was torn. This woman was the mother of Batman's son, and it wasn't right for her to fight or not. Furthermore, she would be a crucial mentor to Oliver in the future. Without her guidance, there would be no Green Arrow, and she didn't want to ruin this important opportunity for her brother. Furthermore, relationships in this world were peculiar. The future Green Arrow would marry Nessa. Regardless of whether they were actually married, she was technically his sister, and Talia was Nessa's sister. They were, in a rather cliched way, related, the kind they could pretend to be strangers on weekdays and share meals together during Chinese New Year. And with her presence here, how far could Bane be? Thea had no idea how to fight this being whose strength was measured in tons. Even an Iron Man couldn't withstand a fist the size of a casserole pot and 2 tons of force. Talia feared a ninja master's retaliation, while Thea feared Bane would burst from the bushes. Fearing both sides, they retreated to their respective groups. "Director Gordon, how's the situation over there?" Thea answered the call, asking about their own situation. "It's going relatively well, but these guys are resisting fiercely. Honestly, I think they were plotting something." The old director's side could be heard firing continuously, reminiscent of Afghanistan. Not only did Thea suspect a conspiracy, but she also had a bad feeling. Between the Court of Owls, Talia, and perhaps Bane, who was hiding somewhere, their high-level combat power was already at a disadvantage. Immediately, Thea ordered a retreat. "Commissioner, go back and arrange for a retreat. We'll slowly withdraw from the asylum. Agent Lila, order your snipers to open fire and bring Robin back. Catwoman, Barbara, listen to my commands and prepare your smoke bombs. And Catwoman, have Firefly help cover our retreat." Firefly hadn't yet accessed their dedicated channel. Thea was worried about her, and she wasn't very fond of Batman's team. Following Commissioner Gordon's orders over the police channel, the main force began to consciously contract. 2 sniper rifle shots rang out. The 2 Talons attacking Robin, with quick instincts, retreated and dodged the bullets as they approached, allowing Robin to smoothly retreat to the main force. Chapter 97 Retreat. Regardless of Robin's skill, his tenacity was truly commendable. Thea watched him scramble back to the crowd in disarray, his face bruised and bruised, his combat uniform ripped open with 2 large cuts, blood seeping from it. He'd managed to stay so wounded without calling for backup, truly a tough guy. "My pager's broken. Thank goodness you guys helped me out." As soon as Robin started talking, Thea knew she'd misunderstood. But remembering the power of those 2 claws, she didn't laugh at him. She told him to retreat to the rear, nominally to hold the line, but in reality, to get him some rest. "Thea, be careful. There's a lot of heat generation in the room to the side, and there's a trace amount of radiation," Felicity warned loudly through her headset just as Thea was about to call for a smoke bomb to retreat. An ambush wasn't surprising, but how did the radiation level come about? As she pondered this, the large iron door on the right side of the gym was violently kicked open, and several tall, burly men burst out. It was hard to tell how many people were coming, but as the iron gate was completely yanked down by the burly man in the lead, more people continued to burst out. Oh? This was the enhanced human Commissioner Gordon had been talking about, the one who could pull down such a heavy iron gate like a piece of paper. While not as strong as someone like Bane, who measured in tons, he was still considered a Hercules. Most of the people rushing out were dressed in ordinary civilian clothes, but their faces were anything but ordinary. Some had blood streaming from the corners of their eyes, others had throbbing veins on their faces and necks, and a few had horns or other unidentified structures sprouting from their foreheads. Their bizarre features didn't look like they had grown naturally. There was only one possible explanation: were these Arkham's signature cyborg experiments? The masterminds were surprisingly fast, producing so many successful products in just 3 days. To confirm her suspicions, Thea drew an arrow and aimed it at the 2-meter-tall, rhino-like horn-like figure running in front. Puff! The arrow pierced the enemy's chest, but the blood that flowed wasn't a normal red, but a strange purple. The burly man, carried back 2 steps by the arrow's momentum, roared, unsheathed his sharp arrow, and continued charging towards Thea. Remarkable. Thea could tell the enemy was definitely injured. As long as he was still bleeding, he could be killed. She continued to draw her bow, like a reborn Sylvanus, gracefully standing on the ground, firing 5 arrows non-stop at the charging rhino. Ouch! The 4th arrow struck the rhino in the left eye, and the 5th pierced his throat. He clutched his wound and collapsed, unable to rise. That was all. Thea curled her lips. These guys looked intimidating, but their true abilities were merely enhanced strength, speed, and endurance. Like the angel of death before them, they needed to strengthen one thing: their brains. He couldn't even dodge the arrows. This guy might even be worse than the angel of death. But the fact that she easily defeated them didn't mean these augmented beings were truly weak. Despite the officer's efforts, using skillful coordination to focus their fire on 3 augmented beings, more continued to emerge from the side door. Chief Gordon, order a retreat. I'll buy you some time. Thea pulled a tangled arrow from her special quiver, aimed it at the previous metal door, and fired with lightning speed. She observed the effect, wondering how powerful these people were, and, fearing she might be unsure, she fired another. A dense web instantly covered the entire side wall. The augmented beings inside, lacking a brain, couldn't discern the white mass before them. They jostled and pushed each other, desperately trying to escape. However, they underestimated the silk's resilience. The first few were instantly caught in the web, and the others behind them used them as fulcrums to push outward. To an outsider, it looked like a patch of white silk, occasionally raised by the group, then silent, then raised again. Thea wasn't entirely sure about her double-wrapped arrows. Theoretically, something that could work against ordinary people wasn't sure if it could work against enhanced humans. She called out to everyone, "Hurry! Let's retreat." Miss Firefly Bridget Pike also joined Thea, but her gaze seemed fixed on a nearby spider web, as if she were wondering what it would look like if it burned. She seemed eager to try it out. "You cover the rear, I'll cover you," Thea whispered to Miss Firefly, instructing her companions in her headset to throw smoke bombs across the way as soon as they saw fire. Her experiments had shown that Batman brand smoke bombs would produce some unknown chemical combustion when exposed to open flames, and today was a good time to test the effects. Miss Firefly didn't wait for instructions. Seeing that the nearby troops had mostly evacuated, she opened the nozzle of her flamethrower, aimed at the Arkham Alliance on the other side, and unleashed her ultimate attack. Her flames were unlike any ordinary flames, more like a mixture of some chemical and kerosene, already burning fully in the air before passing through the pressure nozzle in the incendiary canister and blasting towards the gangsters on the opposite side. This ability is quite powerful, Thea thought to herself. She would definitely write it down in her little black notebook. The best way to deal with this guy is to shoot her kerosene tank with an arrow from a distance. Close combat is too dangerous. Or add fire retardant paint to her clothes? I don't know how hot her flames are. I'll have to test it next time. Barbara and the others saw the fire and threw a few smoke bombs to cover the retreat of the main force. When Thea smelled a sour smell in the air, she knew that the flames and smoke had undergone some strange chemical reaction. She grabbed Miss Firefly, who was in the middle of setting the fire, and said, "Let's retreat too," but before the two of them could run a few steps, a bone-chilling chill rushed over from the opposite side. The temperature in the air dropped visibly and rapidly, and the light, which had been distorted by the high temperature, returned to normal. Mr. Freeze, X2 Thea and Miss Firefly simultaneously spotted the approaching force and slowly retreated. Thea pulled out a specially crafted titanium arrowhead with a Teflon coating. This coating, a proprietary coating used by Quinn Group for high-speed cutting tools, was used to enhance the titanium's armor-piercing properties. Someone who struggled with the naming simply called it the armor-piercing arrow. Miss Firefly, too, remained focused on the situation ahead, occasionally spraying kerosene to slow the enemy's advance. "Let's retreat." Catwoman Barbara approached Thea. All women, this time. There were really all women. 1, 2, 3, 4. The only male, Robin, had already left the line of fire. Relying on Miss Firefly's constant spray of kerosene, the 4 of them slowly retreated from the asylum. Chapter 98 Watch Me Kill Him. In the distance, Mr. Freeze, clad in strikingly stylish armor, saw them retreating. A smile crossed his lips, and he raised his ice gun and pulled the trigger, sending a torrent of icy mist surging wildly towards the women. Miss Firefly, not to be outdone, raised her flamethrower and unleashed a barrage of fireballs at him. The two men exchanged a single word during the battle, but anyone with eyes could see they were utterly at odds, a battle of one or the other. The icy mist and kerosene collided constantly in the air, transforming vast quantities of the mist into water, which then rapidly evaporated into gas. The kerosene was also constantly consumed by the icy air. Neither could do anything, and the situation entered a stalemate. "Can we go up and help?" Barbara, ever the loyalist, automatically assigned Miss Firefly to her side, even though she had never spoken to her. She addressed her question to Thea, a veteran expert in technological weaponry. She was curious about this guy using freezing gas. She'd heard his gun used cryogenic ammonia, similar to her own freezing arrows. Hers used liquid nitrogen, but their cooling effects were similar, making it hard to say which was superior. Her nitrogen, while cooler, had a stronger freezing effect, but it lost more energy in the air. His ammonia, however, could complete a reaction within the gun before being ejected, resulting in less loss. He could, however, draw a constant supply of ammonia from the tanks behind him, while hers were consuming fewer arrows with each use. By comparison, she was still inferior. However, she absolutely wouldn't carry a chemical tank while fighting monsters. It was too dangerous. The solution to both this guy and Miss Firefly was simple: simply locate their gas tanks, shoot them from a distance, and then happily loot their corpses. In response to Barbara's question, Thea confidently replied, "Of course. Watch me take him down in seconds." Her tone was filled with assurance, for she had already spotted the bulge behind Mr. Freeze. He had some sense, having used armor to protect his gas tank, a far superior feature to the careless, unprotected Miss Firefly beside her. Aiming against such a large target was easy. Thea worried only about whether her arrow could penetrate the sci-fi-inspired armor. The constant exchange of fire from the other two also obscured her vision. Separating herself from the others, Thea found a high ledge with a better view and took aim at Mr. Freeze, who was exchanging blows with Firefly. With a hint of smugness on her face, she released the bowstring. The Teflon-coated arrow managed its task with some difficulty, barely halfway through the 10-centimeter target. After a 2-second wait, Thea felt relieved when she saw cold air emanating from the gaps in his armor. "Let's go." No one knew if the guy's gas tank was pressurized, to what extent, or if it would explode from the inside. She flew back to the other women, called out to Catwoman Barbara, and, under Miss Firefly's bewildered gaze, pulled her out. Mr. Freeze, on the other side, was slightly bewildered when he saw them fleeing. He didn't understand why someone so equally matched him would run, but he didn't dwell on it, assuming her tank was out of gas. He pulled the trigger and prepared to pummel them. 2 muffled clicks echoed, and the supposed mist didn't appear. He was still wondering what was wrong with his gun when a powerful force knocked him unconscious. What Thea and the others saw was that the entrance to the asylum was instantly replaced by a massive solid ice, which rapidly spread in all directions. The 4 women wished they had more legs and took off running. Thea and Catwoman, the faster ones, each held a Firefly in one arm. This girl was no faster than a normal person, and with a jar weighing over 10 pounds on her back, she would have been frozen into the ice wall if they hadn't cared. Barbara occasionally pushed her from behind, and they finally made their way out of the door with difficulty. "Thea, next time you make such a big noise, tell me beforehand," Barbara complained, her gallbladder almost flaming out of her chest. "Isn't that great? Mr. Freeze is finally dealt with." Thea felt that with such destructive power, this time it was worth the trip. Barbara and Catwoman exchanged a glance, and Barbara, the more gracious, spoke. "Because of an experimental accident, Mr. Freeze's body temperature remains below 0 year-round. He's immune to freezing. Theoretically, freezing shouldn't kill him." Immune, the 2 glittering golden words shocked Thea. How could this guy have such an unscientific passive? "You didn't even tell me." She turned back to look at Firefly. According to some worlds, this girl was immune to fire? No wonder she was so fearless, carrying a pressure tank around everywhere. There had to be a reason for it. Although it was a blunder, Thea's personality was one of never admitting mistakes, even at death. It was like that in 1.0, and it's still the same now that it's been upgraded to 2.0. She thought about her knowledge of chemistry and physics. "Haha, of course I know. We can't defeat him this time, but thawing him will take a long time, plus recompressing the gas will take precious time. Don't worry. Everything's under control," Thea assured the other women, patting her chest, which was almost see. Catwoman was completely illiterate and couldn't tell whether her words were true or not. Barbara was going to get a PhD in library management, and judging by her major, she had no interest in physical chemistry, so she had no way of judging her. Miss Firefly had never met her before, so she took her word for it, seeing how resolute she was. Realizing her acting had successfully fooled the three, Thea breathed a sigh of relief and began to ponder how to deal with Mr. Freeze. Since the canister shooting tactic didn't work, what other strategies were there? His freezing air was truly potent. Even a rocket launcher would stall or even freeze a rocket within its range. Furthermore, even if he wasn't frozen, his armor offered excellent protection, rendering him virtually immune to ordinary firearms. After much deliberation, Thea couldn't come up with a good plan. This guy, quietly so formidable, grew increasingly concerned about the dire situation. The Court of Owls, Mr. Freeze, and the vast number of enhanced humans created through biochemical experiments, problems piled up one after another, causing Thea's beautiful brows to furrow involuntarily. As a last resort, Thea could only resort to Hellfire missiles, but that was a difficult decision. Even if Amanda agreed, given the black woman's temperament, she would blame him later. This was a last resort. Chapter 99 The Magnificent Sword. Originally, Thea had planned to feign a retreat to lure the group out and set up an ambush, but now, unexpectedly, Mr. Freeze had frozen the entire intersection, forcing her to abandon the entire plan. Miss Firefly tried to leave alone, but Thea half-dragged her into the command vehicle. She was now a valuable asset, and she couldn't let her go until she had figured out how to deal with Mr. Freeze. After a few arguments with Catwoman, they finally managed to keep her. Inside the vehicle, everyone remained silent, each reviewing the gains and losses of the battle. Thea pulled out the sword she had previously collected for scientific research and gently flicked it, producing a low hum. The blade's material was unclear. It was a deep black, 85 centimeters long, and just over a meter including the hilt. It was a traditional English broadsword, but with a thinner blade and double-edged edges, capable of both stabbing and cutting. The hilt was inscribed in Latin, Sword of Azrael. Did that psychopath get his name from this sword? If he were still alive, he could change his name. Thea took the sword in her hand and waved it gently. It was a really good sword, not too light or too heavy. Her height and strength were just right for this sword. This was God's will. Everyone in the car looked at her dancing with the sword unconsciously. Firefly and Lara, who were not interested in cold weapons, quickly shifted their gazes. A few people from Batman's family and friends looked at it for a while. Is this the sword of the Angel of Death? Robin seemed to be very impressed by the sword, but he was too far away when he was beaten by two claws and did not see Thea's battle. He was a little confused when he saw the sword. Thea glanced at him and ignored him. He was really bad at talking. What is the sword of the Angel of Death? Legally and humanly, this is my sword. Which side is the Angel of Death? I don't know it at all. Just as she was about to sheath her sword, the sharp-eyed Catwoman caught sight of the exceptionally ornate scabbard. Did you capture that too? Catwoman's fiery gaze made Thea take a small step back. What? Is there something wrong with the scabbard? There was no question. Catwoman simply noticed the shimmering gemstones. With over a decade of experience in the jewelry business, she immediately knew they were genuine. She wanted to look away, but her gaze couldn't stop. She thought to herself, I'll just take one look, one more, one last look. It's said that women and dragons are similar creatures. Thea's blatant display of wealth caught the attention of the usually aloof Miss Firefly, not to mention the other women. The young woman, Lyra, glanced at her out of the corner of her eye before forcing herself to remain calm. Barbara, from a well-off family, was more susceptible to jewels. After a moment's envy and jealousy, she turned back to her heartfelt conversation with Robin. But the other two women, raised in poverty, weren't so forgiving when faced with the allure of these colorful stones. As the face of the entire Arrow universe, Felicity, known for changing 3 outfits and a new pair of earrings daily, capitalized on her close relationship with Thea. She clutched the sleeve of her combat uniform, her eyes gleaming, practically shouting, "This thing is meant for me." Catwoman, too, was captivated, her eyes fixed on the object, calculating how much it could fetch. She secretly resented the Angel of Death's own incompetence and lack of martial proficiency. Such a Gotham treasure had fallen into the hands of Star City, and had been seized openly, making it impossible for her to steal it. Naturally, Thea wasn't going to go along with her usual everyone gets a share, come on, everyone, take one. She was so broke she barely had enough to eat, and whether she used the scabbard herself or sold it, it had nothing to do with the Gothamites. She wouldn't give up the good stuff she'd gotten. To divert their attention, Thea prepared to ask them about their thoughts on today's battle. Do you think those augmented humans are formidable? Have you ever fought against them before? The women, including Robin, looked at each other and shook their heads. Of course, their nods didn't mean the augmented humans weren't formidable, but rather that they'd never fought them before, making it difficult to judge. Seeing them shake their heads, Thea knew her question was in vain, and her heart sank. She knew she couldn't possibly stop 1,000 augmented humans. Fortunately, Director Gordon, a seasoned veteran, spoke up. I've seen them in my youth. Back then, their abilities were incredibly varied, from aging to mind control, but they all required physical contact. He pondered for a moment. This time, I think they've only enhanced their physical abilities, not those strange abilities. Do you know how to deal with them? Thea asked, politely treating the elderly with respect, her face filled with anticipation. The director, a little embarrassed, said, back then, I just used a stick to beat them. Augments back then were a bit stronger than normal humans, but only slightly. His words made Thea want to fassap him. Look at you, old man, he said, and you were still a hot-tempered person in your youth. What a ruthless guy. You're just going to go all out with no strategy, huh? Barbara must have inherited your personality. This approach is too foolish. A few or three might work, but how can you take on hundreds? Thea, who prides herself on being clever, isn't prepared to accept such advice. You mentioned they were emitting trace amounts of radiation. Thea turned to her friend Felicity and asked. Yes, there was a significant radiation reaction before they appeared. Could they be enhanced with nuclear material? Thea could only rely on the old director to answer this question. After all, he'd seen it back then. Gordon, nearing retirement in his 60s, struggled to recall how the experiment was conducted. Back then, he didn't care how or what these people were enhanced with. Cases were solved, and that was it. Gotham was a constant stream of crimes, big and small. Over 20 years later, how could he remember? He shook his head, indicating he couldn't remember clearly. Thea didn't hold much hope for the old man's memory. Even if he could remember, 20 years later, he'd surely come up with new ideas. His memories from back then would be nothing more than a reference. Fortunately, Thea had been pondering weapons of mass destruction recently, with nuclear weapons, the pinnacle of human technology, being a particular area of focus. She lowered her head and pondered for a moment. Let's install a Geiger counter on the drone and measure the radiation level there, Thea instructed Felicity. Then, suddenly remembering something, she turned to look at the people in Gotham. Do you have a Geiger counter? What the heck? The people present were ordinary citizens turned heroes. Who would bother with such a thing? They were about to shake their heads in bewilderment when Leela saved them. We have one at Sky Eye. I'll have them bring you one. Chapter 100 Batman Returns. Hearing that there was, Thea felt relieved and returned to her focused discussion with Felicity. Their principle is probably to use nuclear radiation to weaken the body's self-protection mechanisms, then add various animal DNA for surface reinforcement. In reality, this kind of reinforcement places a heavy burden on the carrier, and the improvement in strength is very limited. Thea recounted her thoughts, citing her own experience fighting the rhino. Then, as long as we eliminate the residual radiation on the surface of the body, theoretically, the foreign animal DNA will be gradually eliminated by the body's own immune system, Felicity whispered, her chin resting on her hand. But that's easier said than done. Eliminating radiation contamination isn't something that can be done overnight. Chernobyl, from 1986, still stands, 1,650 square kilometers of contaminated land, and no one dares approach. The asylum doesn't have contamination issues, but eliminating these trace elements is a huge challenge. It's unclear whether they have an existing reactor or are using nuclear waste. Waste isn't a significant threat. If they had a reactor with sufficient power, Thea would have to abandon even her previous plan to bomb Arkham with missiles. Let's measure the values first. If they're low, try traditional rainfall combined with boric acid spraying. With so little data available, Thea could only take things one step at a time. But then the question of rainfall suddenly occurred to her, and she asked the people on the other side, who were about to fall asleep, does it ever rain in Gotham? Is it cloudy year-round? Honestly, Her previous rants about nuclear waste and radiation had been a bit frightening, and the friends and family couldn't get a word in, so they just listened in silence. But now, hearing her talk about the rain, it seemed simple enough, a 3-year-old could understand it. Barbara felt a bit disdainful of Gotham's splendor. "No matter how bad our family is, we won't let an outsider like you comment on it," she said grumpily. "Of course it rains, but it's definitely cloudy year-round." Was that really cloudy? It was cloudy year-round. Anyway, Thea hadn't seen a clear day in over a month. Living in a gloomy environment for years, not only did it cause physical illness, but it also fostered dark thoughts, which eventually came to fruition at some point. Normal people commit far fewer crimes in broad daylight than at night. Not everyone has the courage to commit crimes in broad daylight. Thea felt she had discovered the root cause of Gotham's problems, or at least part of it. She also marveled at Superman's good fortune, landing in the heart of the Empire, basking in the sunshine of capitalists. If his spaceship had landed in Gotham, he'd likely be poor for the rest of his life, uncertain whether he'd ever see the sun again. She vaguely remembered a discussion online in her previous life about a demon sealed deep beneath Gotham. So, while she wasn't sure if the perpetually cloudy skies were true or not, she did have a vague memory of the incredibly powerful zombie, Solomon Grundy, slumbering in the Gotham River. If she messed with the weather, would it attract a stronger boss? "Last time, I just suggested mobilizing the masses. Haven't you seen the criminals in Gotham starting to form gangs? But are you afraid?" Haha, Thea felt her blood boiling. It seemed quite exciting. Unaware that Thea had already prepared a massive bomb for them, the family and friends fell silent after her question, not taking it personally, each busy themselves with their own equipment. The journey back to camp was uneventful, without encountering any ambushes. The women all had to change clothes, especially Thea, who had been splattered with blood from her earlier clash with the Angel of Death. Being a bit of a germaphobe, she'd been holding back for quite some time. After a quick wash and freshening, they headed to the conference room. After everyone had sat down for over 10 minutes, the hard-working Commissioner Gordon finally arrived. He hadn't had time to change or wash. Back at camp, he didn't rest a moment, taking a round of casualties before finally meeting Thea for a decision. 14 police officers were killed, 41 were injured, and 3 veterans were killed and 5 were injured. Commissioner Gordon felt a little distressed. Many of his men had died, most of them killed when the enhanced humans rushed out. On the contrary, the veterans were experienced and had a premonition that the situation was not good, so they hid themselves tightly. The few injured were only slightly injured. Shia rubbed her brows. In this battle, 1/10 of the combat power was lost. The results achieved cannot be said to be small. At least the enemy's strengths and weaknesses were understood. It can be said that the expected goals were achieved. However, enhanced humans can be produced continuously, and sooner or later their side will suffer a devastating blow. Just as she was thinking of how to tactfully ask Commissioner Gordon to continue recruiting soldiers, the door of the conference room was pushed open from the outside, and a burly and handsome middle-aged man walked in slowly with a cane. Bruce, Catwoman, overwhelmed with excitement at the arrival of the newcomer, ignored her position on the other side of the table and, using a common Parker move, leaped across the long table, her arms braced against the surface. She rushed to the middle-aged man's side, caressing his face, tears streaming uncontrollably. "Are you really Bruce?" Catwoman gazed at her lover, almost imagining she was hallucinating. Bruce Wayne's voice was as polite as ever, and he embraced her slender waist. "Yes, Selina, I'm back." Just as the two were about to engage in the usual reunion gestures of hugging and kissing, a devastating remark interrupted their long-awaited reunion. "Kitten, I've brought you back. Where's the money?" A graceful, long-haired woman emerged from behind Master Bruce. Thea almost slapped her face in the face at the sight. This person, who had completely ruined the atmosphere and completely disrupted the music for the lovers' reunion, was none other than Thea's teacher, or rather, sparring partner, the head of the Shiva clan. The big sister ignored the surprised looks from the crowd and held out a hand to Catwoman, implying, "Pay up. I'm busy, Shiva, we've been talking about this many times along the way. I'll pay, and you'll let Selina go." Master Bruce still held his savior in high esteem. "No, she's asking for something, and she definitely has to pay. Besides, your company is practically bankrupt, how can you even come up with the money? I don't want your old house." Shiva ignored his gaze, single-mindedly demanding payment from Catwoman. Catwoman was now incredibly embarrassed. She had gone to Star City to find Shiva out of desperation. To be honest, she'd assumed Master Bruce wouldn't be able to return, given his serious injuries and subsequent kidnapping, so she'd promised him an astronomical reward. Now that a living being had been rescued, intact, it would be humiliating not to pay. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.